this meeting to order at this time and ask if there's any declarations of interest. Seeing none, I will move down to community announcements. Could I start with who's keen this afternoon? Councillor Carruthers, start with you.
Thank you. I was happy to attend on Monday the Family Day celebration at the sports complex. It was very well attended, and having the voting there as well, the advanced polls, made it a great way to get our voter turnout out. So that was great. Thanks.
Councillor Crone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to say I too was at the Family Day event, and it was well attended, and I want to thank all the staff and volunteers for taking time away from their families to help out. It was a great day. Secondly, I'd just like to remind everything, put in a plug with my colleagues. We have the North Union Community Centre Beef Dinner coming up on Saturday, March 2nd. If anyone would like tickets, I'd be more than happy to sell them one. Thank you.
Councillor Roy DiClemente.
Nothing at this time, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Persichini.
Nothing at this time, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Morton.
The only thing I have, Madam Mayor, is I did attend the Chamber of Commerce after hours last night, and it was very, very nice. There was a good turnout, and from from everyone that seems to be there, they want to have it again very soon. So I'm sure that the more will be popping up. So
Good to hear. Councillor Foster.
Been out with the Active Transportation and Trails Committee and the Heritage Advisory Committee meeting again last night. Councillor Morton and I were there. To reiterate what other councillors have said, the Family Day event was, I thought, well attended. Too bad there wasn't more people that stepped up and spoke to the clerk about the advisory committee placements. And we should also mention the Ward 1 meet and greet. That was back on February the 7th, I believe. Not a lot of people there, but I think there was probably 15 or 18. And a lot of good conversation. Thanks.
Thank you. Just a couple of things that I attended. The Women's in Business Luncheon. Congratulations to all the nominees and the award winners. And it was a joint effort with East Gwillimbury and Georgina Chamber, so that's always nice to get together with that. Congratulations to our East Gwillimbury town staff who achieved service milestones, receiving recognition on February the 7th and celebrated with a luncheon, some significant milestones for a number of staff here. I had the opportunity to tour the new paramedic facility on the second concession since our last meeting, and would put out an invitation if there are others on council that would like to go and have a tour. We can certainly set it up. The Ward 1 meeting for the residents with Councillor Carruthers and Foster, Councillor Foster, I thought was a good night when you have people, more than a dozen or somewhere in there, interested in talking to their elected officials. It's always a successful evening. And the last one I just wanted to mention was the East Gwillimbury Farmers Market Committee is actively underway. They've held 2 meetings, and they're calling now for vendors to participate with the market, and you can go online to see their application as a vendor. And I think that's Councillor Roy DiClemente.
Thank you. Now that I've gotten myself organized a little bit, I actually realized that I do have a couple of announcements. I like to look forward, and I hadn't had a chance to. I was focused on getting through today as opposed to looking forward into the calendar. But this Saturday, we have 2 events, one taking place on each side of our community. The Lions in Mount Albert are having their annual Maple Syrup Festival with their pancake breakfast. And then later that evening, our Holland Landing Lions are having their annual Celebrity Chef Dinner. So I just thought I would put a plug in for those as well. Next Thursday, I heard our colleagues mention their ward meetings. Councillor Persichini, myself, and yourself, Madam Mayor, are holding our Ward 2 meet and greet at the sports complex on Thursday, the 28th at 6 p.m. So those are my announcements. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, we'll move to deputations. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor, your first deputant is J. Fieger with regards to the Leslie fill operation.
Good afternoon, Mr. Fieger. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Nice to see you again, Mayor. Madam Mayor, councillors, the purpose of this deputation is to ensure that council is aware of the status of our application for a fill permit. It should be noted at the outset that the verbal discussions with the town are accommodating and conciliatory. The staff memorandum presented to council today is deficient on a couple of key points. In September 10th, 2014, the town QP, Cole Engineering, indicated that the clean fill site was substantially complete in its application, and they outlined minor deficiencies. These were subsequently addressed. May 19th, 2015, the staff report to council indicated that the application was substantially complete and that council directs staff to bring back a report with the proposed fill site agreement for approval by council at its meeting to be held October 20, 2015. No draft agreement was in fact provided to clean fill site until May of 2016. In October 2016, clean fill site asked to finalize the draft agreement and were told in no uncertain terms that the agreement would not be finalized without concurrence on the fees in excess of $1 million, on which there's no basis in law. In June of 2018, there was a decision by the Ontario Superior Court that our appearance in court was premature. Under oath, the town submitted a chart of technical issues that needed further discussion. August of 2018, Clean Fill Site addressed each item and forwarded that document to the town. In November of 2018, in a meeting with the town, they indicated they had not reviewed the chart responses and further that our application documents had been lost and requested we provide a copy, which we did in November. As a perfect illustration of the ongoing misrepresentations, today's staff report characterizes this as a new submission, when it's simply a copy of our 2014 submission. This is a transparent attempt to reset the application clock to 2019. Further, the town staff indicated there would be a complete second peer review conducted by the new town QP, and it was committed that the town would deliver these comments by January 31st, 2019. The meeting was set for February 12th. Comments were delivered February 8th, only after 2 reminders by Clean Fill Site's council. In the February 12th meeting, it was proposed that we enter into a series of technical discussions to resolve the town's concerns as outlined in the 39-page, 28-item peer review. This is now characterized in the memorandum of today as the town awaiting a detailed resubmission. We're willing to agree to these meetings on condition the town undertake their own costs. It should be noted, none of these 28 items appear in the chart submitted to the Superior Court under oath. In the interim, it's come to our attention that May 15, 2018, Council has zoned a portion of the aggregate licensed area as an environmental protection zone, triggering further environmental requirements on our part. This appears to us to be a direct action to further complicate the process and is in bad faith. In addressing the repercussions of only 2 of the 28 items, my technical advisors estimate the environmental protection zone requirements will require an additional 9 months to satisfy. The precedent-setting requirement of a record of site condition, which is not actually a requirement under the fill bylaw, will take an undetermined amount of time and will require an additional 7,200 environmental tests. In summary, the town says very nice things and writes down very bad things. The town's legal strategy is to delay and obfuscate at every opportunity, as indicated by this latest memo, which excludes critically pertinent facts. I'm frankly sick to death of the twisting, prevarications, and misrepresentations. To date, the town has not acknowledged nor made any comment on our response to the Superior Court's directive. To date, the town has not acknowledged, in my opinion, QP Burnside was instructed that in the second peer review was to bury Clean Fill Site in additional costs, technical requirements, and operational time burdens. The town has acted in bad faith by rezoning the property. Either town staff is acting outside council knowledge or council is complicit. As outlined in my opening sentence, the purpose of this deputation is to ensure that each council member has been informed and that we have removed any possibility of a plausible deniability. Tomorrow morning, I'm directing my legal counsel to request a date in order to commence a proceeding in the Superior Court to compel the issuance of a permit and for a declaration that the proposed $1 million fee is illegal. If in the interim waiting period we are issued a permit, all the better.
Could you wrap up, please?
I am.
Thank you.
We can go directly to the Superior Court, hearing our case around unlawful fees. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have a motion to receive. Councillor Persicini. All those in favor? That's carried. Okay, opposed? Sorry. You won't receive that. Thank you. Mr. Webster.
Madam Mayor, I don't have a question for Mr. Fieger. As a matter of fact, I'm okay if he sits down because I would like to respond to a few of the statements made.
Take a seat then, please. Thank you.
I've been administrator here for 15 years, and some of the words portrayed today certainly don't reflect our staff team and the experience it brings to the table. Let me assure you, the two authors of a memorandum, not a report, it's a memorandum today. It's an information memorandum. Mr. Newman and Mr. Molinari have a combined over 60 years experience, okay? And they've dealt with this in other municipalities, and the placement of fill is a very, very important thing to get right. We had a pit a few years back, and things were not dealt with. We learned a lot of lessons, and I think we really improved our measures. From my perspective, and I don't want to get into a war of words with Mr. Fieger, but there's been a fixation on our fee, and let me assure you, our fee is valid, it's reasonable, it's been well thought through by staff, and from day one of this, there's been a overexertion of resources and efforts put towards that. My advisement from staff is if there is a little bit more attention paid to getting the information staff's requesting, that this pit could be actually operational and working. I will admit, with respect to the zoning, that whole area, Mr. Fieger, is under review right now with the EP zoning. There was some decisions made by council in October of last year and direction provided to staff, and I don't know if all of that was properly carried out by staff, and we're reviewing that. We had another deputation recently where a gentleman indicated his lands had been erroneously been placed into the EP zone, and Mr. Ramuno and his staff met with that individual. So I would again ask on that specific issue of the EP zoning to make sure that General Manager Ramuno offers to meet with Mr. Fieger and his representatives to make sure that there hasn't been erroneous steps or other things that are unfair to this particular property. There's a memorandum here. I think it speaks for itself, and if Mr. Molinari or Mr. Horner, once that's brought forward, want to speak or add anything to it, I think we can work. I think that from my perspective, I'm advised as soon as we get the information we're requiring and an agreement could be processed, and if at that time Mr. Fieger continues to want to protest our fee, we're more than willing to defend the town position at that time as well.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. That makes it much clearer. I am going to ask for a motion to move H2 forward at this time. And do I have a motion to do so? Councillor Carruthers. All those in favor? And that's opposed? And that's carried. Okay, and so with that, I will now turn the chair over to Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to turn this over to General Manager Molinari to lead us through this. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Mayor. We have a memo that's been brought forward to council today. We believe that we've been fair and reasonable in our summation of the file. We spent a considerable amount of time going through the file to identify when submissions were made, who made them, what information we have, and I think the memo does speak for itself in terms of the volume of material that's made its way to the town, and staff following up on the matters as they come in and trying to work through this particular issue. Our door has always been open. We've always been trying to be accommodating with the applicant and try to work through matters. And that continues to be the case now, and we'll continue to do that in the future.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions or comments on the report that's before us? The memo, sorry. Seeing moved by Tara. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Turn the chair back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. We are now under item, E. Understand there are no presentations at this time?
Correct, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. And we will now move to item F, and that is Budget Committee with myself in the chair. And I'm wondering Mr. Valtic, are you going to lead us with this?
Madam Mayor, I'll just make a couple of introductory comments. We are now essentially kicking off the review of the 2019 water and wastewater budget and related rates that are proposed. We have two attachments for you today. One is a brief presentation that our Director of Finance, Warren Marshall, is going to provide. And then we also have the water and wastewater budget documents that are essentially will become part of the budget book once that's finalized. And Mr. Marshall is going to go through the presentation, and at that point, with the assistance of the water and wastewater staff, can look at the budget book content with you and try and address any questions that you might have as we go through. Thank you.
Mr. Marshall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of committee. Before I get into the presentation, I just wanted to give a little status update of where we are in the 2019 budget. So right now, the total budget stands at $45.1 million. The Budget Committee has reviewed 3 of the 4 components of the budget right now. The final component that needs to be reviewed is the water and wastewater budget, which is funded primarily through user fees through water and wastewater. There's no tax levy component to this budget. So what I'm proposing to discuss today is first off, what is driving the 2019 water and wastewater budget? The staff proposed rates for 2019 and comparing those proposed rates to the council-approved financial plan. So really, there's really one main driver of the 2019 water and wastewater budget, and that's the amounts that York Region, that the town pays to York Region for providing water and sewer servicing. So of the total amount of our water and wastewater budget of $8.4 million, 62% or $5.2 million of it relates to the fees that we pay to York Region. So as in previous years, the York Region is proposing to increase their rates that they charge municipalities by a blended rate of 9%. So that 9% increase ends up being about an 80%, make up 80% of the budget pressure that the town is experiencing in 2019. So based on the increase to the water and wastewater budget, staff has proposed an increase to the fixed charge for both water and wastewater of $5 per quarter per service, which ends up being $40 per year on the average homeowner on water and sewer servicing. So that $40 equates to about a 2.5% increase to the average homeowner, which is in line with inflation and is about 35% less than the increase that was approved last year. So just we've done a little bit of a comparison with some of the municipalities that have already approved their 2019 rates, and they range in the area of 5% to 12% increase to their rates. And most of them are around 7 to 8%. And previously, over the past 5 to 6 years, in the N6, the increases in water rates have ranged around have been over 50%. Some have been up to 60% increase in their rates in that time period. And East Gwillimbury's increase has been 37%. So just to put things into perspective. So based on the average increase of about $40 per year, the portion of the increase that's related to town costs is only $8. So the majority of it, or 80%, is really due to the increase in the regional rates that we are experiencing. So council approved a 5-year financial plan that they're required to under provincial regulations that demonstrates how the water and wastewater services are financially sustainable. And financial sustainability not only includes the funding the ongoing operating costs, but it also includes a provision for the repair and eventual replacement of the town's water and wastewater infrastructure. So as you can see, the council has approved rates that were less than what was approved by council in the financial plan. So the black numbers are the financial plan, and the red numbers are what council has actually approved, except for 2019, which is what we're proposing the rates be. So in terms of overall increase, the rates have, we've adopted a bit over 50% of the proposed increases in the rates over this time period. So just for information, the next update to the financial plan is due in 2020. So next steps today, and we can have some deliberation on the budget. We're prepared to go step through the budget documents that are included in your attachment. We also have some time set aside for at March 5th in the committee of the whole, and we're hoping, and if there's any other time that's required, we'll be able to make some time for that. We're proposing that the water and wastewater budget be adopted by March 19th in order to make our April billing cycle, but that is also flexible as well. So with that, staff is here to answer any questions or to step you through the water and wastewater budget.
Thank you very much. Questions, Councillor Morton?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Mr. Valchich. Mark, how can we get the information out to our residents that they seem to think that this is all our fault, And we need to get the information out there, explain to them. I mean, we had this discussion last week about how we can actually sell it to them so that they do know what our rates are and how it's affected by that of the region.
Madam Mayor, through you, I think that last year we certainly tried to improve simple messaging that explained where the water came from in terms of supply, who supplied us with the water and who supplied us with wastewater services, and that really the town acts as a distributor. Really, that's what we do. We simply distribute the water that we purchase from the region. We distribute the waste through to the regional system for treatment. And so perhaps we need to revisit that and see if we can enhance that even further so that it is very clear what drives the costs that the town incurs, what we're doing to control the town portion of the costs, and sort of how it translates into billings through to residents that are actually using the water and using the waste treatment service.
Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you. So obviously our usage is up because we have more units, but do we have any data that shows the per household usage of water? Is it, over time, is it increasing or decreasing?
Madam Mayor, through you, what I can tell you is this actually is sort of being done throughout the region. There's a lot of efforts to promote conservation efforts. What we've seen is usage decreasing over time as folks are more conscious of not only the environmental impact of water usage, but the financial cost. And I will also point out that that was one of the major that was a major impetus for even changing the traditional rate structure that we had at the town to the one that we have now, because historically there was just a usage component, but every bill was assigned a deemed minimum usage of 50 cubic meters. So what that meant is if you used 20 cubic meters or 30 cubic meters or 40 cubic meters, you were still billed as if you used 50. So there was no incentive below 50 cubic meters to save water. So the current model, there's a usage component, and so for every cubic meter you use, there's a charge for that. For every cubic meter you save, there's a savings on the bill. So we're trying to sort of line up financial incentives to use less water along with the environmental incentives and rationale for why we should use less water, and we've found that in fact is translating into less water being consumed.
That's perfect. I'm glad to hear that, because my only problem with the way this budget is that we're increasing that fixed cost rather than increasing the variable cost. So if we kept the fixed costs the same, increase the variable cost, it would incentivize people to use less water. And, people who are struggling, is there ways for the town to help incentivize with rain barrels at a discount or water saving low flow things? I mean, I would rather us be looking at helping people minimize their water usage, which helps us because, we have all these constraints around sewage. So if we can help our residents use less water, they won't see their bills going up, and it's better for the environment, better for us. So is it possible for us to put the increase on the usage rather than the fixed?
Madam Mayor, through you, that's a very good question, and it's an area that we have deliberated extensively as well as staff. In order to get to a point where the ideal model would be that our distribution system would be fully paid for by the fixed costs, and that the usage would essentially be a flow through from the region. So whatever the region's charging us, we simply charge through to the resident. Right now, the usage portion is covering off some of those distribution costs. So the cost for us to maintain a water and wastewater distribution system is being covered off in part by usage fees. The challenge there is that there's a certain amount of money we need to put, the director mentioned, into long-term planning for renewal and replacement of those assets. We've had some stories in recent years where municipalities not too far from us have explained that part of the rationale for why they're bumping up their usage rates is because people are doing such a good job on conservation. It's a very mixed message, and it gets incredibly complicated when you're top loaded on your usage. People do a great job using less. You're not raising enough money to pay to maintain your system, and so you bump up the rates because they're doing such a good job conserving. It's a complicated mixed message. It's so much of a more effective message if the fixed is paying for essentially the fixed part of your operation, and the usage is really usage, and at that point you want people to use as little as possible. So I'm not trying to complicate the message, but that is just one of the factors that gets considered in determining what is an appropriate fixed portion versus a variable or a usage portion.
So I understand it's more transparent, and I appreciate that. I just feel sorry for our residents who may have gone out of their way to put in water conservation efforts only to see their water bill go up. So I'm not really pleased with the way this is laid out, and I would, despite what you've said, I would much rather see the increases on the variable portion of it. And also, when we communicate this to our residents, it would be very nice if we had a water conservation program that we could also promote at the same time. I'm not sure what that would entail, but there's a lot of things like rain barrels and low flow devices that I don't know if we can get a break on the cost, or partner with Lowe's or something like that, so that we're encouraging people to conserve. Thank you.
Councillor Crone.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Through you to staff, I would first like to reiterate the comments by Councillor Morton. I think communication on this subject to the town is critical. I know certainly from the campaign going door to door, this was a hot topic. People were very concerned, certainly in Mount Albert, about the quality of our water, and I know we've taken some steps to improve that, so I really do appreciate that. But the second one was the cost of the water, and being in a town where I myself, for instance, live in the rural part of our town, and we have a urban part of the town, so I have a well. So for me, this was a big eye-opener. I hadn't paid a water bill in quite some time, and when I was hearing some of the prices quoted to me, I was never so happy to live in the country. It's I think some of my neighbors will say, oh, we don't enjoy all the services of what happens in the more rural parts of the town, or the more urban parts of the town. And I just remind them about the price of water, so they really appreciate their country living even more so. The point I want to get to is I understand the region sets the price for the water all across York Region, and so that price should not be any different for the cost of the water, no matter what town you live in York Region. I guess the differential is where the rates vary is by the distribution costs. Am I correct in that?
Yes.
Okay. So I would really, and I do appreciate the need that we need to set aside money to upgrade that infrastructure. I think East Gwillimbury has a very good track record of not having, I can't remember the last time we had a water main break. I've been in other municipalities where we've had to shut down offices and buildings because of water main breaks. So I think that's a good thing. And I'm not opposed to building and reserving for that. I think that's prudent financial management to do that, to build as you go ahead and plan for the future, so we don't have spikes in our tax base to offset that, which everyone pays, even my neighbors out in the country who don't even use it. So I think there's some merit in that. So I guess my question is, if we decided, I understand that the distribution cost is really the one that's driving the differences between municipalities. If we were not to take the increase this year, would that have to be borne out by the general tax base rate?
Through you, Madam Mayor, no, that wouldn't be transferred to the tax base. That would be absorbed through the water and user rates. So what would probably happen is you might need to take some money out of reserves to fund that difference, or your reserve contribution would decrease. So.
Okay, all right, good, appreciate that. And again, I would just put the plug in again. I'm sure I'll have greater opportunity as we move along in these discussions to educate myself. Again, I do want to speak for, let's get some clarity on our messaging to the folks at home so that they understand what goes into this. Because if you're armed with all the information, then you can make the choices that suit yourself. And everyone is different. Thank you.
Councillor Roy DiClemente.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ironically, I've been around long enough to actually remember how we had it structured. I supported the two-tier system. I echo the comments of Councillor Crone that the high price of water is certainly at the top of the list on resident engagement. And when we look at this increase, it is matched by the amount of time that we spent 3 days talking about the corporate budget, and then a similar amount of money we're talking about in a slightly less time. The reality is that as it stands now, if you are on water and sewer in East Gwillimbury, you are paying $520 a year before you even turn the tap on to use those services. You're just paying for the right or the privilege to have those pipes arriving at your house. We're looking at increasing that to $560 a year. That's a lot of money for people when we're talking about it in that term. I have raised the question before, again, and I think Councillor Carruthers raised it as well, which was why are we not putting the 9% regional increase onto the usage? The reality is that we are raising about $1 million more under the usage, under the variable rate, than we should be, because we are trying to up the delivery charge. So I get that there's an imbalance there, but it's a hard sell to people to explain that to them, that there's a cost to maintaining the distribution system. What I did have two questions. One was the regional costs in the budget document itself are noted at 17% and 13% respectively, and that's on page WWW4. So the regional costs under water costs and wastewater costs are showing as 17 and 13. Is that because we have a 9% levy from the region, and then we're adding on a component for growth, for additional accounts and additional uses? Is that what's happening there?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. And then I wonder if we might unpack a little bit the corporate reallocation line. That's $1.186 million. Can we talk a little bit about that one? Because this is almost as much as what we're putting into reserves. We're putting $1.4 million into reserves. So I'd like to have a better understanding of that line and what's in there.
Through you, Madam Mayor. The corporate allocation line consists of costs that are done in tax-supported departments, but they support the water and wastewater functions. So, for example, the billings and collections are done in the finance department, which is tax-supported, but that's really for water and wastewater services. So costs associated with that are transferred over into the water and wastewater budget.
To the tune of almost $1.2 million. That's how much it costs us to bill people?
No, there's more included. Okay. That's just an example.
That's why I was wanting to unpack it a little bit.
So
I understand the concept of corporate reallocation, but I'm wondering what's in there. I guess we'll put a secondary question on that, and that is, under our corporate budget, we talked about transitional cost savings and trying to find places to save money so that we didn't have to increase the tax rate. What sorts of measures are in this budget that would speak to that same kind of mentality of let's try and find ways to save money so we don't have to increase rates. Which would also extend to the corporate allocation costs.
Good afternoon. Through you, Madam Mayor. One of the things that we've done is we've maintained the same staffing level since 2012. So the operational group hasn't increased its staff. We've also looked at the consumption in the development industry. And any operations related to the development industry, it's a full cost recovery. So not only the labor cost, but the water consumed through that exercise. When I look at the past year, we've brought in the neighborhood of about $300,000 in revenues that aren't included in the budget. And the reason for that is that those aren't sustainable costs. Those come in periodically, and they ebb and flow with the actual development. We've worked with our development crews to include in the development agreements the cost recovery mechanisms, including operational, I guess it's water consumption during the construction build-out. So I think what we've done is we've maintained the level of service for the residents. We've maintained the same level of staff for the last 6 years, and we've recovered costs where we can.
Go ahead.
So if we've brought in an additional $300,000 in revenues and it's not shown in this budget, where did that money go? Did it go into reserves? How was it accounted for?
Those would be returned to reserves.
Mr. Valchek?
Madam Mayor, just a point of, just a little bit of extra clarification on one point, because I think Councillor Roy D. Clemente made a good point about if hypothetically, if you had an account with no water being used, there would still be a bill. I do want to point out that under the historic model, there also would have been a bill, but it was higher. It was actually more expensive for somebody that had zero going through their pipes in 2009 than it would be today, because there was a deemed usage of 50 cubic meters. So you would use zero if, let's say, you were out of the country and what have you, but you were deemed to have used 50. This model, when you're below, it's a little below 20 cubic meters per quarter, you're actually paying less under this structure, despite the fact that it's actually transparent, which was part of what we were trying to do, is say it wasn't very transparent historically because of the deemed minimum. And to Councillor Carruthers' point, there was no incentive financially to save water under the old model. Under this model, it's very transparent what that fixed component is. And once you get below, I believe the number is about 19 cubic meters per quarter, you would be paying more under a deemed minimum model than you would under the current. So just, that's something that's, again, perhaps we haven't explained clearly in the past, and I just wanted to add it in as just some additional perspective for you as you're discussing this.
Thank you very much. Councillor Persichini?
I think it was about a year ago, you and I attended this opening, this South of Forest Edge there, this new water savings technology that just brought out that they would, when the showers would be going on, they would go through this filtration and they'd reuse the same water to flush the toilets. Wouldn't it be nice if down the future that all the builders be able to subsidize a little bit, and the owners, that they can all have this, so it could save a lot of money, and it would be great. That's point one. Point two, Miss Hannah did a great job on a little flyer when I was in the corporate service, explaining as much as you could on where the money, the expenses go. Maybe she can enhance it again when it comes to the region portion. Put down stop, a big little star. This is where most of your money is going, something like that, so people be aware that we're not doing the, we're not charging all those high rates. Like we'd say, big stop signs. Say stop here. Here's where the money is going. Your money is going. Anyway, just an idea. but she did such a great job, and you know, bringing it down to the ridiculous so much per day. And I think we worked on that, Mark, if you can recall. Anyway, just an idea. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Marshall, I'd like to talk about the, what if we didn't raise it? That was brought up by Councillor Carruthers. If we didn't raise it this year and we let it level, flatlined it for this year, and we took it from the reserves, what does that do to 2020?
So, through you, Madam Mayor, so what would happen is our reserve contributions would have to decrease fairly substantially, and it would be hard to start making that up in 2020 to get to the reserve contribution level that we need to get to make sure our system is sustainable.
And that's, that burden is put upon us by the province to have a certain amount of money in our reserves to replace. I think it basically is to replace pipes, so we're not in the situation of some communities where they have a water main break and not the money to fix it or to replace the pipes when they should have been done at the right time. I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you. Councillor Carruthers?
Thank you. It wasn't me who said to keep it flat. I was talking about switching them. I'm wondering if it's possible to look at a tiered rate where once you're over a certain amount of usage, it becomes more expensive. I'm wondering if that's, again, I'm really thinking about conservation, that to give people a way to keep their bills low by putting in practical steps. So I don't know if that's something that we could look at for this year, but I certainly want it looked at going forward with more of an encompassing approach to helping people keep their water bills low through conservation and through tiered billing.
Through you, Madam Mayor, the town does have a tiered rate structure. Over 105 cubic meters, the residential rate jumps up to $3.74 a cubic meter.
Thank you. That wasn't reflected in here.
No.
That's an average? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm on well and septic, so I don't know. But it does remind me of my hydro bill and the lack of incentive I have, other than my commitment to the environment, lack of financial incentive to keep my electricity low when half of it is delivery, and I'm only paying $50 in actual electrical usage. So I would think it would be the same with water. If your costs, the bulk of your costs are just delivery, then who cares how much you save? So that's why I really would like to see that balance shifted more towards delivery. I hear what you're saying about in the past with a minimum delivery. I would not want to go to that. I think that's the worst case scenario. But having more on the delivery, on the usage rather than the delivery, I think would be very good. Thanks.
Councillor Bride Clemente.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. At least, Councillor Carruthers, you're not having to deal with a debt retirement charge on your water bill as well. What I was going to suggest was there's a couple of nuances here because it's a new council and we are, for some of us, this is a new process. I know in prior terms, we had some training from the Ontario Water Centre that talked about our obligations under the Act to maintain a system, that we have an understanding of what, there's some background here as far as our corporate accounts with water and what their fees are, how much they're paying, how this whole thing is structured. It may be helpful, I know later on our agenda we're looking at workshop topics, that for the purposes of that we have some time to really explore this without having to really be under the pressure of having to decide how much water rates are going to be. Ultimately, I feel the same way that the increase should really be on the usage and not on the delivery charge, but I also understand the background and why it is that way. I think for me, the headline is that the increase is a modest increase, which is in line with inflation. And for me to be able to speak to a resident or a constituent and say, it continues to cost everybody more to buy insurance, to pay for gas, to do all of these things, and it costs the town the same things, the same inflationary increases to operate the water system. And I think for me, that's how that's the only reason I could support this increase, because quite frankly, when you have $8 to $9 million in the bank to deal with your amortization, which you are continuing to address your current amortization, you're not addressing the historic amortization, but the rate at which you're using your assets that you have at the present time is being addressed through the amount you have in reserves. We are in incredibly good financial shape. And so I really hesitate to increase rates further when we have the money to operate the system safely and securely and somewhat affordably. At the same time, if it's an inflationary increase, that's the only way I could really support it at this time. Thank you.
Councillor Morton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I think probably my question might be for Mr. Molinari. What is the approximate lifespan for our infrastructure?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Typically, these are all long-term assets. Somewhere in the order of about 80 years would be what we would expect to get out of a pipe that's in the ground.
Well, that is not saying when our pipes were put in the ground. It's from when it starts. And some, I'm sure, we will not be seeing at 80 years. And there's others that we've had water in the town of East Gwillimbury for quite some time, and they will be much closer to being replaced. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to change gears a little bit here. On page 18 of the budget, I hope I'm not getting ahead of ourselves here, 2019 new capital, it talks about a water loss control program for $100,000. That being under new capital would lead you to believe that there's no water loss control program now. And I'm just wondering if somebody could explain that a little bit better to me. I know that in my previous career, we went to great lengths to make sure that the water department knew what we were doing and how much water we were using, and I expected at that time that that was an extensive program that was going on. So is this something new, or is this a continuation or bettering what we already do?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Water conservation and water controlling water loss is something that the town's been doing for some time. So you're right, fire department will track the water that they use for some of their training. Typically when we flush, we measure that water now. We've implemented over the last several years, been very successful at minimizing some of our extreme flushing areas and reducing the flushing and avoiding future costs. In some instances, that's involved some pretty good partnerships with the region, town of Newmarket, and ourselves, and a lot of work in order to work together as a team in order to find ways in order to improve our system, our network collectively, in order to reduce some of that flushing. So there's been a lot of work that's happened over the last several years on this already. I think what this project is really looking to do is look at more innovative ways in the future and maybe look at technology to help us locate other sources that have been difficult to find in the past. And we may not even be there with technology at this point to do that effectively, but we have, part of our continuous improvement is to start looking at those options and those opportunities, and where possible, spend a couple dollars in order to save many more dollars.
Councillor Bride Clemente.
Thank you. I had the same question as Councillor Foster, which was trying to understand whether this was a $100,000 problem. It seemed like a lot of money to be spending to research something that we know is, we've done research before. I know I learned the phrase inflow and infiltration, I. So I know that this has been worked on already, and I wanted to have a better understanding of what are we estimating that we are losing more than $100,000 worth of water through I&I? What are the potential for saving as well? And which created a third question for me, which was, how much are we still flushing as part of the chlorine residual issues that we've had in certain parts of our system?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Maybe I'll start on this one, but I think I'll ask Larry to come in and help out a little bit. But essentially, this is an iterative process whereby I don't think you ever really finish with this particular exercise. You can identify, you work on the issues that you know, you try and find good approaches in order to minimize some of the costs that you're finding. And as technology gets better over time, you leverage that technology so that you can, again, improve your network and reduce your overall costs and maintain the most efficient network that you can. Every network, every water network is subject to losses, and it's unavoidable. The question is, how much energy and time does it take to minimize those inefficiencies, and how do you turn the inefficiencies into eliminating them and turn them into efficiencies? So, Larry, maybe you can add a little bit to that.
I think you've done a great job, Mike. We always strive to reduce the water loss, and as Mike pointed out, the water loss throughout the region, it's pretty much an ongoing operational loss of 10 to 15% water in all the systems. When I looked at some of the records, one of the municipalities to the south of us, they actually lost 4 times as much water as was provided to the town of East Gwillimbury in total. So it's a function of the amount of infrastructure that you've got in the ground, potential leaks with that. And as Mike pointed out, this is something that we continuously try to improve upon. We're starting, this capital item was to bring in some professionals to help us analyze what's happening from a desktop perspective and then move into the field where possible, trying to identify those sources of water loss in our system.
Councillor Morton.
This isn't a question for Larry, but on page 19, it says here that we do the water replacement project because we have to satisfy the American Water Works Association requirements. Why are we going by the American Water Works Association? Do we not have any requirements here in Canada?
Through you, Madam Mayor. The AWWA is the overseeing body across North America. We actually are a member of the AWWA as well as the Ontario Wastewater Association, so they all use the same guidelines across North America. So when we refer to the AWWA, it's the same guidelines that we use here in Ontario.
Councillor Roy DiClemente.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wasn't sure if I'd heard an answer with respect to the flushing with our chlorine residual issues that we've had previously. I know that there were some partnerships and some strategic acquisitions of capital to try and address there was an auto flusher purchased and so on. I'm just wondering if we're still continuing to see this issue and what the order of magnitude it is.
Through you, Madam Mayor. I think the issue that you're referring to is the significant flushing that we had in the Young Green Lane system. That problem now has been resolved. We have very little flushing in that part of our system. Throughout the system, we are going to have some operational flushing. We're going to go in periodically to do some maintenance. The only area now that we have ongoing flushing issues is in the Vale Drive area. And the Bales Drive area is just is basically the end of the line with very low consumption. So for the foreseeable future, we'll probably be in there doing some flushing. As far as quantities, I apologize, I didn't bring that with me, but that'll be a subject of another report that you should see shortly before council.
And that's where we put the commercial fill material. There was a piece of equipment that we purchased for bales that was going to help try to address that flushing by having all of the commercial operators who were purchasing water from us use at that location and pick it up there because it was convenient as well.
That's correct. The intent was to promote water consumption at that location and make some money off of that water that would normally be sent to waste.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we've had a very thorough discussion about this. I've heard a couple of comments. One is that it is the cost of doing business, and if we don't increase it today, we're going to increase it tomorrow. I have heard a couple people talk about that they could support it if it was the cost of inflation, and that's pretty much what we have done with our budget. I might add another little caveat to that I'm kind of hearing around here, is that we make a conscious effort to seek out some environmental initiatives. Not that it's going to happen this year, but that we start to work on it and to find about some water-saving features that we may be able to take advantage of. We have, I know the Conservation Authority has water-saving seminars. Perhaps we start with that, try to get our group of environmental committee members who may be interested in water initiatives, water-saving initiatives, and to come back with something perhaps that we could present to our home builders or other home builders out there that are not in our community but do have some initiatives. I think it's an opportunity to be leaders in this. We have been leaders in many other environmental initiatives, and I think this is one now that has come to our attention that we should be stepping up and trying to have some options available when we're sitting here next year at this time.
Will agree.
I'm seeing nods. We have a resolution in front of you. And I would require a mover. I'll read it out. I see people are. Be it resolved that the 2019 proposed water and wastewater budget presentation and review be received, and that Budget Committee recommends to Council that the 2019 proposed water and wastewater operating budget be endorsed and approved in principle, and that Budget Committee recommends to Council that the 2019 proposed water and wastewater capital budget be endorsed and approved in principle. I might add to that somehow we take a look at some environmental incentives or initiatives that we may want to put in that, and that we ensure that, and I'm not sure whether we want it in the resolution or whether it's understood, but we have Ms. Hannah here today, and I know she does a terrific job in telling the story. You've heard our long discussion about it and debate, and I see your fingers were moving along the way, so I'm hoping that this discussion can be shared with all our residents who do pay for water and wastewater, because it's not been taken lightly here today. It's something of serious nature, and we have heard from all of our residents the need to take a look at it. With that, could I have a motion to receive? Councillor Persicini? All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, staff. Appreciate that very much. At this point, I will move to item G, and that's Development Services with Councillor Crone in the chair.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I feel this may be anticlimactic after our discussion. The only item on the agenda that we have today is a Development Services Building Branch Report, Building Bylaw and Strategic customer initiatives. I would pass it over, General Manager Ramuno, do you have any comments on this?
To you, Mr. Chair. No, just that we have our Deputy Chief Building Official here to provide a brief presentation on the proposed bylaw, and he'll be able to answer any questions the council may have.
Mr. Webster?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to provide a little bit of an introduction to Andres as well. He may be new to some of our council members. He's played a largely behind-the-scenes role as our deputy CBO since he started with us about 10 months ago. And just as I introduce Andres, I'd like to let you know just a little bit about his background. Mr. Ramuno has now been with us for, I guess, a couple months, and so I thought it might be more appropriate that I was part of the recruitment of Andres. I'm not sure if our CBO is here today, Mr. Leo Grillet, and we've been fortunate that using what we call our Shamrock model, we've had Leo, who's actually retired twice. He retired from Aurora and he retired from Vaughan, and he brought incredible experience in for us as we move through our first phase of growth here. And we're fortunate to have Leo. Leo's going to be stepping down sort of mid-year, and so it's important the bench strength that you build as a team and as an organization. And I thought having Andres present some of the changes that he's leading in the department and some of the innovations he's looking at are important, and as well to just talk a little bit about his background. And just so you'll know, he came from the private sector originally. He had several years in the private sector dealing with both residential and commercial construction. And then most recently was 15 years with the city of or town of Pickering. And so he rose through the ranks there, the management to a senior management level, and he decided to accept our offer as deputy CBO, as I said, just at about 10 months ago. So I'd like to have Andres do a presentation and to outline the bylaw. Again, maybe not that riveting, but certainly a very important document. And he's also going to talk about some of the other non-bylaw type things where we're looking with Mr. Ramuno at some customer-focused and employment-focused innovations in the building department.
All right, with that being said, we'll hand it over to you, Mr. Zonyi.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Your Worship and councillors, and thank you for that introduction. And thank you for the opportunity to present the proposed changes to the bylaw. It is important that I start off with a bit of a history of the bylaw that we have here in the town. Reportedly, it's over 35 years old, which means that brings us to circa 1985. The current statute was legislated in 1992, which means we're significantly out of date. There have been some changes over time, but it's important to go through our bylaw and bring it up to current standards. The Building Code Act and the Building Code have introduced new definitions as well as new occupancy permit requirements as well. Some of the major changes that I'm proposing in this bylaw are an authority that is clearly defining the agreements that a CBO can enter into. Those will be conditional permits and covenants agreements, as well as to establish policies and procedures. The new bylaw has a new comprehensive fee schedule, which means that all the fees are located in one place. The current bylaw, we're jumping between the schedule and the bylaw itself to figure out what the fees should be. I'm hoping that with these changes, it'll help our applicants figure out what the actual costs should be. This will increase our transparency. We've also introduced a new schedule for submission requirements. So now we're detailing specifically the types of drawings that are required for specific types of construction. It's no longer going to be subjective. You're not going to go into the front counter and figure out and ask the person at the front counter that day what needs to be submitted. It's all going to be in the schedules now. I had to add some revised and new definitions and introduce new classes of permits. Some of the permits that are required are things like underpinning, for example. Recently in Toronto, there have been a few residential house collapses because of underpinning, where the entire house was underpinned and it just fell in. Right now, we have no permit in place for that kind of a construction. So that's an example of one of the permits. The new bylaw is going to be reflective of what is required by statute and what is required by regulation. So the class of permits falls under the Building Code Act, and the occupancy permits fall under the Ontario Building Code. The enforcement regime for those are entirely different. Right now, they're all combined into one regime. In that sense, East Gwillimbury is not unique. This is typical for most municipalities, and unfortunately, they haven't updated their building bylaws yet either. The new building bylaw clarifies the refund policy. The current bylaw is a mixture of refund and retention policies, and again, is not transparent to our applicants. I've introduced some processes that help the applicants as well. For alternative solution, we clearly explain when a third party is going to be engaged because of a lack of subject matter expertise. And it requires their buy-in before we would charge them and continue to review an alternative solution application. We've also introduced a process with this bylaw for abandoned permit applications. Currently, people can apply for a permit and leave it there in perpetuity without actually following up with the town for anything. And our main goal is to achieve compliance with the Building Code and the Building Code Act. With this bylaw, we will be able to set up a process in place to either abandon those applications or to pursue it legislatively in other ways. Similarly, revisions and resubmissions, right now, our building bylaw doesn't address any revisions. They're treated as new permits. I'm hoping that our new bylaw will help the residents with a lower fee, with a revision fee instead of a full permit fee. Some of the other changes I've added is referencing the demolition plan from the Professional Engineers Act. This came about as a result of the Uptown Theatre collapse in Toronto. Under the Professional Engineers Act, the demolition plan is now required for all demolitions. Right now, our bylaw does not require those demolition plans. So we've introduced that. So any demolition that is going to take place will ensure that the demolition plan is available. This ensures that adjoining companies and adjoining businesses can remain operational and that the customers will remain safe. So some of the business first initiatives that we're looking at are clearly defined building permit classes and fees. The new schedule is a table format. And again, it's a comprehensive one. That's the only place you will need to go to find out what the fee is. This will help the councillors as well in the inquiries from residents. We have clearly defined and transparent processes. The permit fees are remaining unchanged. However, we are making some changes to the plumbing fees for houses. So instead of counting individual fixture units, which is time consuming, we are now going to have a flat fee for the plumbing. This helps our builders who have a bunch of subdivision houses to go in with one number instead of figuring out individual permit fee costs for each house. Similarly, for repairs of existing plumbing, to help our existing companies and businesses, instead of charging a linear foot for the plumbing systems, we are simply charging a flat fee for the repairs and the replacements. The excavations have already been done. We already know where the pipes are going. There is no need to charge the full linear fee costs. Some of the strategic direction that we're looking at for the building standards branch include improving this building bylaw, the ability to establish policies and procedures, implement some of the recommendations from RESCON. RESCON actually made 3 recommendations, one which deals with applicable law and provincial crown corporations. We have no control over that. The other one is the recommendation to rely on professionals such as the professional engineers and the architects. We have no control over that. Those are requiring legislative changes. However, the third one is the electronic submission process. This is something that the town can actually take on and follow through as a recommendation. We are also looking at improving the integration with other departments, and actually just today we put fire on our permit processing system, and hopefully that'll avoid the residents from having to apply to a fire department individually and a building department afterwards. We are going to be improving the coordination of the inspection services between the departments as well, so that residents will only need to call to one place instead of 2 places, and make sure that we are all there at the same time. And that's all I have. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Questions? I guess you're the chair. Sorry about that. You go ahead. How did I do so
I wouldn't
far?
dare presume to tell you how to run your council, Madam Mayor. Just point of clarification, should we not move the report and presentation first? Mr. Clerk?
Through Mr. Chair, certainly you can have a mover to put it on the floor for discussions.
May I have a mover? Mr. Foster, Councillor Foster. Councillor Foster. Very good. Any questions? Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you for that very thorough presentation. When I was reading through this, there's a lot to unpack. And given that it's all new and it's not redlined to show where the changes are, and I understand why, it's hard as a new councillor to get a real good grasp on what's new and what was already existing. So I appreciate that this is more transparent and that it's very comprehensive and much needed if we're so out of date. I think it's hugely important that we're looking at this, given the amount of building that is going on, and we need to make sure that we're doing it right. It would be very helpful if, especially for the public meeting, if there could be some sort of chart provided that shows what it was in the past and what the change is for any major changes. Like underpinnings it doesn't sound like something that's going to really come up a lot, but for the average person, what are the things that have changed that we would need to know? What does it look like now and what will it look like in the future? I had a couple of questions. First of all, the use of the term business first, I take exception to, because we should be residents and taxpayers first, environment first. There's many things that are more important than putting business first, I believe, when we are responsible for building this town for future generations. I don't know where that came from or if that is something that can be changed in the language of this to remove that. The other question I had is around the solar and geothermal fees. We have an obligation to our children, our grandchildren around climate change, and I think anything that we can do to help incentivize people to put in geothermal, solar, wind, anything that will help lower our carbon footprint, I think we need to be looking at how can we reduce those fees rather than increasing them. So I don't know if you have any comments on that, and I had 2 more things I want to bring up after that.
Through your worship. Yes, so as far as the changes are concerned, the bylaw has been entirely rewritten, so everything is new. As far as the schedule is concerned, just about everything is new. As far as the fees are concerned, the fees are actually highlighted for what is existing and what is new. Anything that has a class of permit right now has the existing fees. Anything that is new is highlighted in orange. So that is being presented in the public meeting as well. To your second question, business first, I am cognizant of the fact that we have to bring businesses in to EG, And I think any tool that is available to our economic development team would be helpful. That is not to say that we do not consider other things as important. We do have a sewage system maintenance inspection program in place now, which has received good responses over the past month, and that is imperative under the Source Water Protection Act. So we are fighting multiple fronts, and the Business First is really meant to assist our businesses and to show that we do recognize that in some cases our fees may not be representative of the costs that we would be incurring. And to that, and to speak to the solar and geothermal, there was no previous class of permit for solars on non-residential buildings, which really didn't make much sense. There was also no class of permits for geothermal, period. So the amount that is in there is estimated to be the representative cost of us going out there doing the plans examinations and to perform the inspections as well.
I understand it's cost recovery. I just would like us to be in a position where we could incentivize some of these things that will make a big difference to our climate long term. Again, I have to say, I do not want to see business first. I think our residents always come first. I understand we need employment, but we also need water, and we need a whole bunch of things. There's many things that we need, but we always need to have our residents at the center of all our decision making. That's what we're here for. My other two questions, one was around the septic mandatory inspections. I was wondering how many, just ballpark, how many that would involve in our town. Homeowners that are on well and septic do pay a big price in maintenance inspections. And so would this be in addition to that? If someone had an up-to-date maintenance inspection on their septic tank, would they then have to pay again? Because that just seems like a cash grab.
Through your worship. The septic maintenance inspection program right now deals with any properties that are within the vulnerability score of 10, which at this point in time is approximately 65 properties. Those 65 properties have already received communication from us. Response has been relatively good. The second stage is to get into the vulnerability scores of 8. Lake Simcoe Conservation Authority hasn't identified other properties yet that are within the Lake Simcoe tributary area. So once we have that information, I would be better able to tell you how many properties would be affected.
And is an up-to-date septic inspection that the homeowner's done, would that be accepted, or is this fee in addition to that?
In general, most homeowners actually take good care of their septic systems.
Yeah.
The goal of the program is to make sure that it does get pumped out and inspected every 5 years.
Right.
So it's not an annual thing. It'll be every 5 years that those properties that are within these zones that are identified provide proof that they are maintaining their septic systems.
And so if they are doing that, they won't have to pay this additional fee?
They don't have to pay the additional fee, no.
Okay. And my last question is around, there's a fee for electromagnetic locking device of $200 for each electromagnetic lock. What exactly is that?
Yeah, so as I was saying, there are quite a few class of permits that are not being reflected in our current bylaw. Sprinklers even, fire alarm panels, magnetic locking devices. These magnetic locking devices are used to control access. The fire department generally looks at them, but it does fall under the purview of the building code.
Okay.
And there are many other classes of permits that have not been addressed up till now.
Okay. It just seems high for a lock. This is like a door lock?
It's a magnetically controlled lock that is tied to the fire alarm panel system.
Oh, okay. I see. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that.
Okay. Just point of order, and maybe Mr. Velchik could help me on this. I think the Business First naming was more of a branding exercise than a philosophical direction of the development services area. But maybe, Mr. Velchik, you were involved with that. I'll let you add some points to that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, the business first is really a mantra that has existed for some time in East Gwillimbury. However, I would suggest has not been as effective as we need it to be moving forward. I know in some of our early discussions around strategic plan objectives and sort of where we want to go with over this coming term of council, there's been a real emphasis on economic development and job creation. So Business First is really the program that we're hoping sort of spells out how the departments and processes will work together to prioritize job creation as a priority in the town, not to suggest that residents are secondary. In fact, one of the significant benefits of job creation is not only do we get the non-residential taxes in that help support and keep our taxes for residents down, but it also provides opportunities for residents to actually work in the community that they reside. So there's a number of benefits to ensuring that we attract and retain quality jobs in town. So that's what the reference was intended to speak to, not to suggest that there's any sort of other purpose other than that economic development and job creation is a priority.
Okay, Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you, and I understand the importance of the job creation. It just, saying something is a priority, we can have multiple priorities, but when you say something is first, it implies everything else is second. So as a branding exercise, I take exception to that, and that's not a message I want to send to our residents, that we put business ahead of everything else. It's important, but there's a lot of things that are important. It's a priority, absolutely for sure, but implying that everything else is second to business, I don't think is a message I would want to convey to the residents. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Roy DiClemente, you had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of thoughts. I think, first of all, Andres, you've been busy in the past 10 months. I appreciated the comments that you made. Well, I can't give you a red line addition because we started over. You issued a demolition permit to the bylaw and started over. For me, I think whether we call it business first or client focused or whatever it is, I appreciate the efforts that you're going to make things easier and more transparent for our clients, be they businesses or residents. For me, I know that each time we get the annual report from our building branch that talks about the open permits and how they're, how many of them are open and how long have they been open, and having a mechanism to have them closed finally is an important one. Breaking down those barriers within your silos of departments and having fire speak to building and having a seamless, forward-facing, client-focused approach, I think is a good one. I think it may be helpful for members of committee who have not been exposed to the septic reinspection process to maybe have a copy of the report that was, the final report that was submitted, because I, as well as Councillor Carruthers, had also called it a cash grab at the time when we were trying to deal with it, but it was something that was a legislative focus. And I think it was more than 65 properties that we were talking about. It was basically anything within, I think it was 100 meters of watershed or water course. And that had a tremendous impact or potential impact to our residents. One comment or question I had, happy to see the online submissions, because I often hear from residents who are just trying to get a deck permit that they work full time and they want to do the work on the weekend and they can't get in here to submit. I'm wondering if we've explored, or as part of this process, we've explored extended service hours, even maybe just during the building season, where there's one evening a week where you can come in after hours to speak with building staff. It's just a thought to put forward as part of that enhanced service focus. And I did want to comment to Councillor Carruthers' point about the green energy systems. In the past, the fee for a solar photovoltaic system was, I think, closer to $650 or $700, and so we as a council lowered that in order to incentivize people to bring it in, because even though you do require a building permit, in some cases there needs to be structural work done to the roof, we still want to make sure that it's not cost prohibitive to have people install these new systems that will save them money in the long run. So I'm happy to see an expansion of that category and it actually having its own line in the chart. So those are my comments, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Persichini.
I just wanted to congratulate the staff and the team for doing a great job of all these changes. It's going to make the the residents and or the builders much easier. So congratulations. There are some positive things happening. So thank you.
Are there any other questions? I think certainly from my perspective, I want to thank you for all the hard work that you've put into this, and I appreciate the efforts that you've done to build in efficiencies and reflect the realities of the world we live in today. I think sometimes government gets branded for being bureaucratic and slow, and so thank you for trying to address that and making us a little more efficient and responsive. So with that, if there are no other questions, I will call for a vote. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Do we have any other comments from you, General Manager Ramuno?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, none at this time.
To committee, do we have any other questions left for Mr. Ramuno? No, seeing none, I will pass it back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. We're under item H with Councillor Carruthers in the chair.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. We have two items. One we have already dealt with. So we are on page 66 of your agenda. The speed limit reduction on Queensville Side Road between Woodbine and Highway 48 to 60 kilometers per hour. And over to you, Mr. Molinari.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The report essentially speaks for itself, but it's really a continuation of a project report that we had completed last year, and really just coming back to council to summarize our discussions with some of the local residents and basically advise council that residents were generally supportive of the speed reduction, and we're recommending that we proceed with that, given that Queensville Side Road is fairly narrow right-of-way and road surface, lots of rolling hills, and we feel that a lower speed limit would improve safety in that area.
Thank you. We have three resolutions that I would like to have someone move. The first is just simple receipt. The second is that the 80-kilometer posted speed limit on Queensville Side Road between Woodbine and Highway 48 be reduced to 60 kilometers per hour. And the third one is that the traffic bylaw be amended to reflect the proposed speed limit reduction to 60 on Queensville Side Road between Woodbine and Highway 48. Can I have someone move that? Councillor Foster, do we have any questions? Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Molinari. Do you see this as a trend in moving some speed limits from some other roads as well?
Through you, Madam Chair, I believe that as opportunities come up for these, we try to look at the area somewhat comprehensively. If there are other locations where we feel that some speed limit reductions are warranted, then we can certainly look to do that as well.
Thank you. Councillor Roy DiClemente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to staff, one of the comments from the residents said that they would support a change to 70 but not to 60. I'm wondering if staff could just comment quickly on the recommendation here.
Through you, Madam Chair. We did consider that. When you look at the narrow pavement width and you look at the rolling terrain that's out there and the Transportation Association of Canada guidelines, the 60-kilometer design speed or posted speed certainly fits much more closely with those guidelines than the 70. And that's why we're suggesting that the 60 kilometers be adopted.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Through you, Madam Mayor, Madam Chair. I was going to suggest that we also add another clause that we advise York Regional Police of this change so that they may undertake possible enforcement activities in support of this change. Because quite frankly, if we lower the speed limit but don't enforce it, then then there really doesn't have the effect that we would like to see. So I don't know if I need to make a motion to that effect to amend the resolution?
Does anyone have an objection to that amendment? Seeing none, we can add that.
Thank you, Madam
Is there
Chair.
any other comments or questions? Councillor Crone.
Yeah, I would speak in favor of this. I live on a rural road as well, and I was involved in lowering the speed limit on my road, and so I appreciate the impact it could have. To Councillor Roy DeClementi's point, I too support it's all great, well and good to reduce the limit, but if there's nobody there to enforce it, then, nothing happens. So I think it's important that we have that amendment. Thank you very much.
And perhaps before we send out the police, there can be a bit of a warning to our residents if we can get one of those speed limit signs put in and, good communication on the side of the road that this is a new speed limit before we start getting people dinged with speeding tickets if they're not well aware. In connection with, if there's no other questions, I just had one other comment. When we talk about standards, the width of the road, whether it's number of driveways, whether it's rolling, that sort of thing, it'd be nice to take a little bit wider look at our community with the expansion of second concession. I do hear a lot of people talking about why is that still at 60 when it's built it looks like a road that would be safely to travel faster. So if we could also look at some other roads in the town, make sure that we're being consistent when we're looking at the standards for speed. Is there any other comments from the committee? All in favor? That's carried. And that's all we have. Mr. Molinari, did you have anything else to add?
Nothing further at this time, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from members of the committee? Seeing none, I'll pass it back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. We are now under Community Parks, Recreation, Culture with Councillor Persicini in the chair.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have one item solely, Community Park and Recreation Culture Report, CPR C2019-07, Ankle Park Lighting Award. Have a contract you have it in front of you at page 75 to 79. General Manager Carruthers, do you have any additional information or comments on this?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. This is a report that recommends an award of contract that is linked to and subject to council approval of the capital budget and this respective project under the capital budget. This recommendation is to expedite the install of the lighting system for the 2019 sports field season, presenting a benefit to the town and its valued sports field users. This is a sole source recommendation, but it's very important to note that it is based on a competitive process that was conducted in 2018 and in accordance with our procurement bylaw. This recommendation has been vetted through financial services and legal services. And lastly, this project is 100% development charge eligible with no funds required from the tax base. Be happy to answer any questions related to the report.
That's a good news story. Yes, the question, Councillor Crone, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to staff. A couple of things I noticed. It was the contract you selected was Wayne Electric. Are they a local company? And secondly, I think if memory serves, we had allocated about $500,000 for this endeavor, and I see your budget's coming in at under budget, which is always good. Could you just confirm that?
Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the first question, Wayne Electric, I'm not sure if they are locally based out of East Gwillimbury. However, they have installed a number of sports field lighting throughout York region. In particular, they've just recently installed the sports field lighting up in Queensville at Valley View Park, which was just completed this past week. So Wayne Electric does have a proven track record and history for installs within the Greater Toronto Area, in particular York Region. I do apologize. I don't know if they're specifically based out of East Gwillimbury, but they do work in York Region. To the other question with relation to the budget, the budget did come in less than originally anticipated. A number of works were performed in conjunction with a separate capital item, which was security lighting and parking lot lighting and walkway lighting in the park. As a part of that project, we did have main electrical services brought in from the street into the park, power distribution, vault and panels put into the park, and some distribution equipment that can also feed the sports field lighting as well. So everything factored in, we were able to decrease the overall cost for the sports field lighting installation at the baseball diamond and sports field soccer pitch, sorry.
Madam Mayor's next, and then
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through to Mr. Carmison. This is a really good news story. I know that our soccer community have been waiting a long time for this. I'm not sure if you can tell me, and I won't hold you to it, on when it might be completed, based on all things being equal.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we are aiming for late in the spring, early summer. There is a long lead delivery with regards to the lighting poles and fixtures. That would be the first item of business we would need to expedite, is the order of the equipment, because they can typically take anywhere between 6 to 8 weeks to have the equipment delivered, and then it would be lining up the electrical crew to perform the install. So we are projecting right now for late spring, early summer to coincide with the soccer and baseball season for our users.
Councillor, go ahead.
And if we're not, do we have a contingency plan for fields? I know it can really pose a problem for schedulers if they thought they had fields, and I know this is going to extend our season for sure.
John Manager Carruthers, go ahead.
Through Mr. Chair, we do have some capacity at Mount Albert Lions Field as well as Brenner Park here in Sharon. So we do have a contingency plan, and we are pleased to report that Valley View Park in Queensville is approaching substantial completion now. As indicated, we have had those lights at that new park up in the My Queensville community installed this past week, and along with the playground equipment, and we are just awaiting final grading and sodding at that location as well. So we do have a number of different options at play, but it still is a priority for us to gain even more capacity and provide even more options at the end of the day for our users, and Anchor Park is and provides that ability to do so.
Perfect, thank you.
Councillor Carruthers, please.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to see this below budget. That's fantastic. My question is around when and how will lights be controlled? When are they coming on and off?
Through you, Mr. Chair, typically there's a control panel that's in the lighting control room or vault, and that is controlled through internet connectivity. So we do have the ability to control the lighting system through our scheduling software. So we would, that reduces the times when the sports fields aren't being used, and it will shut off the lights during dormant periods when the sports fields aren't being used.
Thank you. My concern is around the light pollution, knowing that that's an environmentally sensitive area. I was just out walking behind there, and there's so many animal tracks and that, and I just think about the difference it will make. Obviously, we want the lights on when people want to play on the fields, but I want to make sure that we're minimizing the amount of light pollution when the fields aren't being used. I noticed the security lighting is on at night, and is that on all night long or just during certain hours, or when is the security lighting on?
Through Mr. Chair, the security lighting is attached to a photocell, so it will come on at dusk, and then it will come on, or sorry, it will turn off at dawn. So that is a system that's interlocked with a photocell based on light levels for daylight.
And that's based on experience with the need for that type of security lighting? Yeah, I'm seeing nods here. Okay, thank you very much.
Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Roy Clement. Is there any further question from the committees? Seeing none, can I have a vote? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. General Manager, do you have anything to add on that? Comments on?
Through you, Mr. Chair, nothing further at this time. Thank you.
Back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. We're under item J, Corporate Services with Councillor Morton in the chair.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Mr. Valchich. Will you be addressing this, or will Ms. Hannah be speaking with this?
Madam Chair, I can just make a couple of basic overview comments, and Ms. Hannah's here if there's any questions. But just by way of a brief addition to what's here, in 2018 we piloted a townwide open house. It was very successful at that time. We had a number of residents drop in, and as a result of the success of that, we are planning 2 of such open houses in 2019, the first in April and the second in the fall. And really what we try and do is have representation from all our operating departments and any of the issues that we're working on that are involving any sort of public input. It's a very efficient way for residents to come and not only receive information on matters of personal interest, but also to provide input in a whole host of things in one stop into the town office. So that's what we're planning on doing again this year, and this memo is simply to give you a little bit of an idea of how that planning's going and what the next steps are getting ready for April.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Valchich or Ms. Hannah? Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. I know that, excuse me, that there was an ask if there were any other organizations or committees that we thought might be of interest, and I might suggest the Chamber of Commerce. Perhaps they're already on the list, so if they're on the list, that's fine too. I have recently had a meeting with the CAO of South Lake Hospital, and they are anxious in getting out to the community to bring their message. So I would hope that the timing will work for them as well. And I just wonder if there's anyone from our agricultural community that could come out. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, we'll follow up on all of those suggestions.
Nothing further. Could I have a motion on this, please? Madam Mayor, all in favor? Motion's carried. Mr. Valchich, do you have anything further?
Nothing further, thank you.
Okay. I'll turn the chair back to you then, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. We're under item K, Emergency and Community Safety Services with Councillor Roy DeClemente in the chair.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There are no prepared items on our agenda today. Chief, do you have anything to add at this time?
With thanks, Madam Chair, nothing further.
Members of committee, anything to raise into this area? Seeing none, I'll turn the chair back to you.
Thank you very much. We're under item L, and that's administration with myself in the chair, and we are going to take some time and talk about the strategic plan workshop presentation. And who might be taking? Mr. Webster, will you take over with that?
Madam Mayor, thank you for the introduction. This was a component that was rescheduled due to inclement weather, if you recall, and we had this booked for a few days ago, and we rebooked it. At EG, we pride ourselves on doing things a little bit different, but a whole lot better, to quote Chief Dawson there, and this strategic plan process is another one that we take great pride in. I can almost guarantee you that every municipality in Ontario is currently undertaking a council strategic plan. At least 90% of them are. I could guarantee you as well that the majority of them have retained an external consultant to lead this exercise. And in this one here, we looked at some of our folks in our organization that we've grown and developed and looked for some stretch assignments here. So I'm going to introduce the three individuals that have been leading this assignment. Firstly, we have a member of our senior management team and Director of Communications, Laura Hanna, and she's been spearheading this initiative. And she's been very capably assisted by two of our other employees. Mr. Kevin Brake is with us today. He's a development manager in our community infrastructure and environmental services area. And Kevin's been a big part of the process, and as well, not with us today, is Amy Artinian, who is currently, she's with our economic development branch under Mr. Valchich full-time, but she is currently in a seconded role, as we know, with doing our corporate survey follow-up. So I'm going to pass it on to the team here, and look forward to a good session.
Thank you, Tom. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of council. Today, Laura Hanna and I will be walking you through the strategic plan workshop. As Tom noted, Amy is unable to attend today, but has contributed significantly to the process. For this workshop, we will ultimately be discussing a proposed concept and structure for the 2019 to 2022 plan, but first we will discuss how we have come to where we are today. So just a bit of a background. I wanted to remind you of the work that's taken place over the last 3 months. We've held our strategic plan session as part of council orientation. We have conducted council one-on-one meetings, reviewed the strategic planning documents of comparable municipalities, as well as conducted resident and staff surveys. So moving forward, today we're conducting our first workshop looking at the proposed structure and concept. This spring, we're looking to have a second workshop looking at the draft text for the plan, including vision, mission, and values. Following the spring workshop, we'll be coming forward to council with a presentation of the proposed plan and design for approval in June of this year. Thank you. As you're aware, we held a strategic plan brainstorming session during the council orientation in December. Key themes coming out of that discussion included economic development, job creation, growth management, preserving our natural and cultural heritage, resident safety concerns, investment in infrastructure to support growth, fiscal responsibility, high quality municipal government, and quality of life. Moving into our council one-on-ones, reiteration of major themes here discussed, including growth management, communication, transparency, fiscal responsibility, infrastructure, quality of place, and environment. I also wanted to note we'd like to thank you all again for taking the time to meet with us to discuss these items discussed at the council orientation brainstorming session. Further, as part of these meetings, we received some great feedback with respect to the design. It was suggested that the design have a resident focus, that there was an enhanced digital presence, and that it was more readable in an online format. Additionally, we're looking to have an updated and streamlined look, as well as more graphics and more of an engaging kind of plan document. Out of our feedback from the one-on-one sessions, it was suggested that we take an opportunity to review strategic plans of municipalities with similar growth patterns to East Gwillimbury. These included Milton, Newmarket, Georgina, Bradford, West Gwillimbury, and Whitchurch Stouffville. Interestingly, during our research, it was noticed that there were many differences between these municipalities. No one seemed to do things the same way. We did find there were a variety of naming conventions for the strategies. For example, using vocabulary such as priority, commitment, and goals rather than pillars. We found that this is something we thought might be beneficial to the town here, based on the feedback council has provided regarding additional clarity to the public and the strategic plan's role and how the public can interpret the plan. Laura will be speaking to this in more depth shortly. Moving into the resident survey results, residents and staff were consulted by way of survey in early January. And, regroup here. Generally, the results of the survey were aligning strongly with what we heard from council during the one-on-one sessions. About 50% of residents responding to the survey indicated that, within the strategic plan, Pillar 2, the existing plan, building a complete community that provides healthy places to live, work, play, and learn, was of most importance to them. Top priorities for residents also included a transparent government, maintaining a great quality of life, protection and emphasis on the importance of the environment, growth management, and creation of parks, trails, and recreation programs. Notable priorities beyond the top 5 or the top priorities of residents included public safety, the Highway 400-404 link, inclusive programs for residents, downtown revitalization, servicing of employment lands, and affordable housing. Moving to the staff survey, top priorities included employment land servicing, development of the health and active living plaza, the ops center, as well as growth management and enhanced programs. Further, staff identified Pillar 3, or existing Pillar 3, a high-performance municipal organization committed to service excellence, as key. We feel this was a good indicator that staff are committed to carrying out the mandate of a high-performance organization. Other notable priorities for staff included quality of life, investment in infrastructure, transparency, and fiscal responsibility. Generally, feedback from both residents and staff was positive and constructive in nature. This feedback has been taken into consideration in preparation of the proposed structure. With that, I'll hand things over to Laura, who will be walking us through the proposed updates. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Before we move into today's proposed structure and concepts for this workshop, I just wanted to provide you a reminder of where we've been as far as the strategic plans go before, because we will be referencing these in the conversation. So in 2011 to 2014, this is the previous strategic plan. I just want to bring your attention to a few different features of that plan. At the time, there was 5 different pillars, each with a themed header and a pillar below that. And so that's something that we'll be coming back to. In 2015 to 2018, what you see is a much more streamlined approach. So what happened is those 5 pillars were streamlined down to 3, as seen on the screen. And the themed headers were also removed. So it was a much more condensed strategic plan. So before we move into the proposed structure and proposed overall concept, we did want to outline again how we arrived at these proposed structures. We gathered all of the feedback, as Kevin mentioned, from several different areas, and all of that was combined If anyone walked by my office, you probably saw big pieces of paper on the wall where we were doing brainstorming and pulling all of what we heard from council, from the public, and from staff. And then we started to group that information. And from those groupings is how the themes and the topics that we're going to be discussing today, how we arrived at those. So there's two things that we're looking for today. One is the proposed structure. So this here is discussing a change for how we can talk about and look at the strategic plan. So in 2015 to 2018, as I mentioned, there wasn't headers or themes. We used strategic pillars, which guided the plan. So if you look into the plan, the pillar was the top portion here. Then we had sub-pillars or subtext. There wasn't quite a name for these sections. So with our discussions with the council one-on-ones in particular, we had a lot of conversations about what does the plan mean for residents? How can they understand it? What does it mean when they pick this up to them? Do they understand it? Is it clear? And again, that same conversation in regards to staff. How does staff engage with the plan directly? So with those thoughts in mind, and when we began reviewing the municipal comparators, we did notice that there's a lot of different language that's used to describe pillars. For people that don't necessarily have a strategic planning background, the word pillar could be a little abstract for them. So what we're recommending is we move away from something like that to something such as strategic priorities. I think anybody would be able to pick up a document and understand, whether they're a resident or a staff member, that these are the priorities that this body has indicated for this term of council. Beyond that, as well as strategic priorities, we would offer, instead of sub-pillars, strategic actions. The pieces that are below the pillar, these are the actions or the themes that we talked about in council orientation, so the specific things that you want to see occur would be the pieces that supported the priorities, so the actions that would achieve those priorities. And this is something we can come back to at the end just to have a bit of a conversation about as well. So I'm just going to move on to the proposed concept. I would like to start by reminding council that this is the feedback that we've heard. And one of the things that we did hear loud and clear, especially in the council one-on-ones, is that the 2015 to the 2018 strategic plan had many strong features. It seemed to uphold the ideology that council was looking for. However, it did need some updating and refining. And so what you'll see is really exactly that. We didn't break away from the 2015 to the 2018 or the 2011 to 2018. It's really an update and a refinement to that to meet the themes that we've talked about as a group. So one area in particular that was repeatedly discussed, both in the one-on-ones and the orientation, was the need to strengthen growth management in particular. So this could be addressed in many different ways by incorporating it into the council vision or into all of the pillars. So I think there was several conversations where we talked about a number of ways we could look at growth being incorporated into the strategic plan. What you'll see as we move forward is that we've actually separated it out as its own priority. The reason that we did this was through conversation, we knew that transparency was a #1 priority for council. We think that should you take a couple different approaches, you risk the chance of burying growth management. For example, you'll notice that each of your council reports has a strategic plan alignment portion. Should you have growth management embedded in the vision as opposed to being its own standing priority, you might miss the opportunity to be able to embed that type of pillar right in your reports, and therefore increasing the transparency and indicating how important it is to you. So this was just one focus that we took by separating out essentially strategic pillar 2 into growth and then infrastructure. You'll also see that we've maintained programs and services. Again, through our conversations, this was reiterated that it was extremely important for us. And then again, with municipal government, ensuring that we have an effective municipal organization, which is essential to our day-to-day business. What we feel is at this point, the priorities that we're recommending have captured everything from the previous 2 plans, but also honed in on the themes that we've heard specifically. So I don't think there's anything that we've talked about that is missing at this point, but we may look at realigning it based on how our conversations go today. I'm just gonna have a drink. Okay, so I'm just going to walk through the 4 strategic priorities that our group is recommending at this point. So just as a reminder, we're here today with 4 proposed areas of focus, and based on today's discussion, we'll come back with a comprehensive plan and text. So for example, what you see here is not what we've brought to you today. We didn't want to develop the actual pillar or develop the actual strategic actions until we are all in agreement that this is how we'd like to move forward. So this is a concept of 4 priorities, and what you see on the screen below in this text, those are simply the themes that we've been using since the beginning. So in our orientation session, we had boards and there was headers and pieces below that. These are simply lifted from there and then grouped. So there hasn't been additional work to rewrite these, and that's what would come at the next stage. Oops. Okay, so for growth, I did want to mention that we did repeatedly hear that growth was a major area of focus for this term of council. We heard that there needs to be a focus on high standards and accountability, ensuring that the town grows in a balanced fashion. So what that means is really a focus on economic development and employment within the town. Also under this area is a focus on preserving the environment and natural features while we grow. We've also included heritage buildings and districts in this area. And one final area we wanted to include was a variety of housing options and advocating on behalf of residents for affordable housing. So that's essentially how we've grouped the growth priority. And as I mentioned, previously our strategic pillar 2 was split, and we pulled out growth-related items, and we've pulled out infrastructure-related items. So core infrastructure is really an essential part of our business. It's really a look at the tangible and what allows us to do some of our softer services such as programming. So in this area, some of the areas that we've captured are maintaining and building our assets while ensuring we're putting away for the replacement in the future. We've also heard the need to focus on servicing. So what we would include in that is not just the pipes and the roadways, but telecommunications and broadband. We've also included the revitalization of downtown key areas and the need to develop appropriate facilities such as our Health and Active Living Plaza and Operations Center. Moving along to programs and services, it's an important part of our council and our town that we ensure our residents have a high quality of life here and that we balance affordability of programs that we offer. So what we want to talk about here is there's 2 types of affordability, and this is conversations that we had a lot during the council one-on-one. So what we've done is split it out to affordability and fiscal responsibility, and we've captured those as 2 different items. There's affordability of programs, which you will see here, and we'll discuss fiscal responsibility in a moment. Our core business, again, like I mentioned, is the programs and services, which we need to maintain. And through discussion, we wanted to capture the inclusion within programs and services and community safety. And this could be through our emergency community safety services branch, but also through our municipal partners such as York Regional Police and the York Region Paramedic Services. Also in this area is a focus on the additional services of arts and culture and cultural heritage. Okay, so moving on to the 4th priority, I would like to note that we didn't list these in order of importance. It's not a 1, 2, 3, 4 situation. It's more of a puzzle where you need all of them to go together and work in harmony, so we haven't numbered them in this case. We've updated this pillar slightly from what you would have seen in the 2015 to 2018, and although it does carry on some of the same features. So firstly, it's about building that strong staff team, and the partnerships, which will allow us to expand our services and provide more to residents. And our partners can really range from volunteers to sports groups, community groups, other levels of government, or even private businesses, so that would be all-encompassing. If it can really help to move the business of the town forward in a positive way, then it's something that we should be actively promoting. Also in this package is actions and commitments towards fiscal responsibility. So what we heard in a lot of the conversations was affordability of programs, but making decisions that are fiscally responsible. So we did take the liberty of putting this in on your behalf, and we can discuss that conversation. But what we heard when discussing the priorities is that they're really a commitment from this council to residents. And what we heard time and time again is you've made a commitment to be fiscally responsible and transparent in all of your decisions and dealings. So we've grouped them together and put them here. Another area was to ensure that we put residents first, as we do with customer service and communications being a main focus under this priority. We also want to have an inclusive environment that celebrates diversity. And lastly, to remain innovative and flexible. We're open to changes and bumps in the road, but we want to be ready and willing to change as our path may be altered within the next 4 years. I think this is a really key and unique opportunity to include something like this right in your strategic priorities to let people know that you're ready for that and you're open to changes and challenges and working with staff as that happens. So in summary, today, what Kevin and I are looking for is some direction to move forward to come back with the next strategic plan workshop. So looking at the proposed structure as one conversation, looking at the proposed concept as another. So now we've gone through everything. We're here to listen to you. We do have note takers that are watching the live streaming right now, so they're going to be capturing the conversation for us so we can come back to that. But what do you like? What are your thoughts? What jumps out as working? What isn't working? What changes would you like to see?
Thank you. You've done a lot of work in a short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. Very well done. I'm sure there's going to be questions and suggestions. Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you. Thank you for putting this together. You really captured what we were all saying, and I appreciated the one-on-one. On page 87, you reiterate what we had said: transparency, fiscal responsibility, quality of place, environment, growth, and infrastructure. But only 2 of those made it into the 4 priorities. So I just feel that we were really listened to, and on page 87, it's right there, and I agree 100% with that. But then there's a leap, and I would say leap backwards, because the 4 priorities here, growth, infrastructure, programs and services, and municipal government, are exactly the same as 2011 to 2014, with the environment removed. So to me, that's a huge step backwards, that we would go back to 2011, but without a priority around the environment. I would like the 4 priorities or 5 priorities to be taken from those ones that you reiterate on page 87, and perhaps some can be combined. To me, these priorities need to be commitments. So we're not committing to growth, we're committing to responsibly manage growth. We're not, as far as quality of place, that's a commitment. Transparency and fiscal responsibility, that's a commitment. Municipal government is what this all is. It's what we do. It's not a commitment. So I would like to go back to page 87 from the one-on-ones where you reiterated what we were saying. So it's past that.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, there,
These
those
right
ones.
Here. Yep.
Yeah. And to, transparency. Yeah, okay. To go back to those and be using those, and perhaps some of them, maybe environment falls under quality of place, fiscal responsibility and transparency maybe go together, but to phrase them as our priorities as a commitment, not just growth, but responsibly managing growth.
So we're talking about ensuring that the wording of those pillars and those headers are focused on what the commitment is, rather than sort of a generic as it stands right now, and ensuring that they align here.
Yeah,
Okay.
and the major problem is that this is exactly the same as 2011 with the environment removed. And I just think that's a really bad message to be sending, that we're going back to 2011, but we're taking out our priority around the environment. So I just think that it's too bad that this landed exactly where we were in 2011, but I do think that this page is really, really good, and taking directly from those words there that came up over and over again is a better starting place than the 2011 plan.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
Good job.
Any thoughts? Councillor Roy DeClemente.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wanted to commend staff for the work that they've done. They've really, I think they've really captured our discussion and have been able to pull together all of the different perspectives. I really like, I don't know what page it is, the proposed concept with the 4 priorities, where they're sort of interlinking. And as you said, you know, they're not pillars, they're not standing by themselves, but they're interlinked and they work together in unison. And I think that's a really important visual for people to see, as opposed to having one standalone. To Councillor Carruthers' point about the environment, I did see that it kind of slid off a little bit, and we can't, this document can't be all things to everyone, but it was, I think, if we go back to those sheets that had our stickers, that some of those initiatives come through in that, and whether it shows up under infrastructure or whether it shows up under growth, I think we do want to have a strategic action listed somewhere that we can point to say we are still thinking green, and that we haven't lost track of that, because that's really part of our corporate culture, is that to use that branding exercise that we've used for I don't know how long, but that thinking green was really important to us, and I think it still is, and I think we want to make sure that we reflect that here. Thank you.
Councillor Carruthers. Crone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just wanted to give my congratulations. It's a tough job pulling all this together. I've been through my fair share of strategic plans in my life, and I know the good ones are living documents, and they don't stay static. The bad ones just end up on a shelf collecting dust, and we ignore them. So I think it's incumbent upon all of us to make sure that this is a living document, and that we try to infuse it in things that we do. Anyway, again, my thanks. I know it's a little bit like herding cats with all of us, and I'm sure this will continue to evolve as we go along. Thank you so much.
Anyone else? Thank you very much. You're in the right direction, that's for sure.
Okay, through you, Madam Mayor, if I can just clarify 2 points here. Essentially, we are okay with the updated proposed structure as well as the concept. So we will look at the verbiage to ensure it is aligned with the council one-on-ones that we have. We do feel it's reflective of that at this moment, but perhaps the wording didn't showcase that as strongly as it could, so we'll definitely take a look at that. And then ensuring that the environmental piece is very clearly laid out within those pillars.
It's woven through, but it's not as prominent as it has been in the past. Okay. Okay, moved by Councillor Persicini.
I thought she was finished.
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry. My main concern, like I see it that you've heard what we've said throughout this. My concern is just that the words that are on the main priorities are exactly the same as 2011. So although the intention might be different, that's just what I'm getting at. And like I said, tremendous work put into this, and absolutely it can't be, as Councillor Clemente says, it can't be all things to all people, but I just don't think it should reflect word for word what 2011 was. So that's my only problem. And like I said, going back to those 6 priorities from page 87, I think is where to start, and that they're worded as commitments. And it doesn't have to, not a long-winded sentence commitment, but transparency is a commitment, growth is not a commitment, unless we're pushing for growth. But I don't think that's what we mean by growth. Our commitment under growth is managing growth effectively. So on the right track, just I have an issue with the language. That's all. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I wonder if we should take a 10-minute break. We still have a number of items to go over, and we've been here since just before 1 o'clock. So if I can, 10 minutes, be back at 3:30.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Lamanna?
Madam Mayor, I have a mover for the strategic plan workshop, but just I'm going to put on the screen for you the resolution that was proposed in the agenda.
Thank you.
Just for council's clarity. So just wanted to ensure that we get the vote on this. I don't believe we recorded that yet.
Okay. People fine with that? Yes, go ahead.
To fully reflect this, Madam Mayor, I think the second and third, that may be eliminated, and I think we receive it and that we continue to further develop and report further. I think there's been some good discussion here, and I think I wasn't sure if the 4 or 5 were structures or concepts in my world, so I didn't want to sway.
Until it's finished, we're not quite sure.
I understand their commitments, so we'll move that way.
Okay, is everyone comfortable with that?
I agree with Mr. Webster that the second one should come out as well. I'm not in favor of the proposed structure as it sits right now. I'd like to see it come back. I'm not sure exactly what proposed structure we're implying we are agreeing to or endorsing.
I think what we're doing now is just having staff continue to move along based on the discussion that we've had here today.
Excellent, so number 2 can come out then. We've got one, we're receiving it, and the last one that we're directing staff to further, I can't read it. Directing staff to report back, further develop and report back, which is what we're asking. If we are endorsing something, I'd like to know exactly what it is we're endorsing.
Councillor Roy DiClemente?
Just wanted to clarify, I believe this is Councillor Persicini's motion, and my understanding of what we would be voting on was that we were endorsing the elimination of the pillars and creating strategic directions. There was those 4 interlocked pieces with much more work to be done. We saw the spreadsheet, the slide that had several different milestones, but that we are telling staff that we are headed in the right direction and that we want them to further develop this further. If we're just receiving it and telling them to go back and do more work, then we're not giving them any direction. So I want to feel comfortable with the motion, and it is Councillor Persicini's motion at this point. If people aren't supporting the motion, that's okay too. This is a democratic process, but I want to give staff some direction about where we want to head with this. Are they in the right direction, or are we asking them to go back to the drawing table?
From what I heard, that we are in the right direction and to develop it to the next steps.
Right on.
So right now, we have the 3rd point removed. Council endorsed the proposed strategic plan concept. That's gone. And what we do have is that council endorsed the new proposed structure of the strategic plan, and that council directs staff to further develop the strategic plan and report back with a draft text version of the strategic plan. Just about. This is Councillor Persicini's motion at this
Point of order.
Go ahead.
Once a motion's been moved, it's the table's motion. It no longer belongs to the mover. So it's once it's been moved, it's placed on the table, and it belongs to the assembly.
Okay. Mr. Clerk?
Through you, Madam Mayor, there was a suggestion of amending the main motion to remove the third clause of the proposed resolution. Council or committee can vote on that separately to remove it, and then on the main motion, if you so choose.
Is that what you choose?
I would like to separate the motion, so we vote on each one, because I'm not in favor of the second one. I don't think I don't feel I'm in a position to endorse as it was presented today, because it reflects 2011 and not 2019.
Okay. So the first portion is that the strategic plan workshop presentation be received. And I will go ahead, Mr. Clerk.
Through you, Madam Mayor. So Councillor Carruthers had a point of order with regards to procedure. So there was a motion put on the floor with regards to the entire motion as presented by staff.
Correct.
Then there was discussion to remove the third clause. So if committee wants to vote on the removal of the amendment of the main motion to remove the third clause, that's what you're deciding on now. So I would need a mover for that, and then we can vote on the main motion.
Thank you. Councillor Morton, you're moving that? Thank you. Okay. So we are now voting on, could you repeat that again, please?
Certainly, my fingers don't move as quickly. So Councillor Morton will be moving that be it resolved that the main motion be amended, striking out the third clause that council endorsed the proposed strategic plan concept.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
Thank you. Following that, the main motion as presented by Councillor Persicini reads, be it resolved that the strategic plan workshop presentation be received and that council endorse the new proposed structure of the strategic plan, and that council direct staff to further develop the strategic plan and report back with a draft text version of the strategic plan.
Correct.
And I asked for that to be divided and that we vote on each recommendation separately.
So through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Carruthers, you're moving that you're splitting out the main motion then.
Yeah, dividing the main motion, yeah.
So if committee wants to vote on that.
Okay. So, and that's moved by Councillor Carruthers.
It's not a motion to be divided, to be voted on. If someone wants them, the motion separated, then it's voted on separately. It's a unanimous to have it all voted on together. If anyone wants to separate out a motion, then it can each be voted on separately. And it's just that number 2 I want.
Mr. Clerk?
Through you, Madam Mayor, as previously noted by Councillor Carruthers, the motion is now owned by the Assembly. So if you want to split out each clause, then committee should vote on that.
Okay, so that's what we will do. So the first is to, I'm sorry, I'm just having a little trouble with that.
I'll try to increase it. Here. What is it?
It's okay. Be it resolved that the strategic plan workshop presentation be received. All those in favor? And that's carried. The second one is that council endorse the new proposed structure of the strategic plan. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And that council direct staff to further develop the strategic plan and report back with a draft text version of the strategic plan. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, there we go. Okay, so if we can have a 10-minute recess, be back here about 20 to 4. I hope that we can accomplish the rest in an hour, but one never knows for sure, and we've been sitting since 1, so thank you. Okay, we'll get back, and I will turn the chair back to I will take the chair. And we are now at item number 2, which is the Inclusion Charter of York Region. That's pages 101 to 111. And Mr. Webster, would you like to introduce this, please?
I would, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much. This is another very important initiative that we've been working on over the last several years, and Director Michelle Collette, Director of Human Resources, is a member of our senior leadership team, and she's pleased today to have a report and a presentation about inclusivity and diversity and importance in our workplace and our community, and I'm going to pass it on to Michelle to lead the overview.
Thank you, Tom, our CAO, and very pleased this afternoon, Madam Mayor and Council, to be here to discuss a very important initiative moving forward, our Inclusion Charter. But before I get into that our exciting presentation, I'd just like to make mention that we have some guests here in our audience from the region, and they're here today. They're on our committee, and they're here today to bring support, and possibly if there's any questions I can't answer, I know they'll step up and assist. So here we go. So some background. York Region, as we know, is one of the fastest growing and most diverse communities in Canada. As of 2016 census, 1.2 million people called York Region their home, representing all ages, backgrounds, and interests. Our community as well includes people who speak over 120 different languages and come from 230 distinct ethnic origins. As indicated in our staff report, our staff actually are fluent in 7 non-official languages, which provides support to our residents and creates an environment of customer service excellence for all residents. As you may note in the report, languages such as Arabic, Bulgaria, Italian, Macedonian, Mandarin, Persian, and Talmi is our staff speaks. So just to let you know that, and it's a good moving forward. As you can see up here, East Gwillimbury has participated in the collaboration of the Municipal Diversity and Inclusion Group since 2016. It includes, as you can see on the chart there, over 20 member organizations that serve people who actually live, work, and visit here in EG. As displayed, you can see we have our municipalities throughout the region. We have YRP, we have healthcare providers, we have the school board, conservation authorities, Children's Aid, and United Way. So it is quite a diverse group and a very interesting group, and we have great meetings, rest assured. Let's talk about the charter. The charter model was identified as an effective way to respond positively to rapidly changing demographics and provide what I would call a framework for promoting programs, services, and facilities, workplace that create an inclusive environment for all people. Endorsement of the charter will affirm our commitment to being inclusive for employees and customers alike. Some of the proven benefits of having a charter would include higher employee engagement, because they see that we believe in diversity and inclusiveness, greater opportunity to access and retain talent. It shows that we're innovative and progressive, that we look at greater customer service experiences, and we're looking at needs as we move forward to the future. So some more background. This charter, as indicated in the report, is a result of approximately 3 rounds of community consultation and discussions with individuals, organizations, boards, councils, groups, and our staff. Thousands of people across the region and organizations have been part of this development, and really it shows an example of collaboration and inspiration at its best, as we'll demonstrate later. It really is, we believe, truly an initiative developed by York Region communities for York Region communities. While there are other inclusion charters out in the world, and they exist, none exist in this particular format. The customization of this charter and the approach is innovative and progressive, and in the end, it has resulted in a very unique approach. As you can see here, this is an example of our EG experience when we had community consultation. That was a few years ago, and we invited council, residents, and staff, and we had good attendance, and we had great discussion about what our charter should look like, what is diversity and inclusion in our community, and it was just a very positive experience and introduced the concept of the charter. The next slide here shows the endorsement and approval of the York Region Charter, and that happened actually in June of 2018, and you might actually notice some folks in the audience in the picture there. Look closely. Elements of the charter. Up on the screen here and in the document is our charter. What this represents, I won't read it word for word, but we'll wear it proudly once it's endorsed. These elements encompass what we believe our priorities, our plans, our vision, and our culture, both corporately and for our residents. So I'll leave that with you because we'll be showing you in the end what the charter would look like. Implementation of the charter. The vision of the charter will be accomplished through actions, and they will be incorporated into communication strategies, working with our communications team here, as well with the region. We will have training programs, and we will have policy development that will all frame out from the charter. We will implement the communications both internally and externally, so our residents are quite aware that we have this charter. We will look at our policies and make sure that we have inclusive practices within them. And of course, as I said, training for staff. Here's an example of some of the communication strategies that we'll be looking at. These posters were actually developed by the region, and as I said, we'll be working with our communications team. This will continue as we grow and develop and embrace the charter, and as we grow as a community, both internally and externally. Here is the charter, drum roll. So here it is in front of you. And we just want to let you know that the first two paragraphs are common in all charters across the municipal group. And so the first two paragraphs are common. And then the third paragraph, which is really important, speaks specifically to EG and incorporates our vision and our culture. So those paragraphs for us are important, and you can see them on the screen, and they are in your report. You will notice that the charter has also gained international recognition through United Nations, their training center, and some other groups. And I expect in time we'll receive other acknowledgement and possibly awards in the future. So signing the charter, we're looking to sign the charter, would occur March 5th. At the council meeting, based, of course, on council's endorsement, and I'm happy to answer any particular questions you have today.
Thank you very much. Questions? Not seeing it. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I don't see that in our package. I see the one that's labeled like Section 1, Section 2. Just before we endorse it, I want to see it.
Go ahead.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. What you see, the verbiage is the same. It's the actual graphic we were able to have produced right after the staff report was completed. So the region assisted us in creating the actual graphics, but the language would be the same as in the report.
And that's the Appendix 2 of the report?
Correct. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Morton.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Mr. Webster. Tom, a number of years ago, we were presented with a plaque from the York Regional Police Diversity Committee that swore that we supported the diversity and everything within East Gwillimbury. And it was presented before council by the police and by that committee. Have we ever found that? Did we ever know what happened to it? It was on the wall as you come into the center.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I do recall that initiative that the York Region Police led at the time, and I think it was Chief Labarge possibly that led that, and it was a municipal and YRP partnership. That particular plaque we're still looking for, and I know we've had our maintenance staff looking for it, but I think this is, maybe that was a seeds of this program, which is actually much larger, and we can see through the partnerships and the various groups in this one, it's really a York region-wide partnership with all the groups, municipalities, and other agencies as well. So I think this is meant to be maybe a version 2 of that initial program.
Not seeing any other? Okay. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you. So with that, could I have a motion to receive? Councillor Persuccini? All those,
I would like to add to that recommendation, since this is a call to action, part of this says the town is committed to taking action. So I would like to add a third recommendation to that since we won't be taking the action ourselves as a council, that we direct staff to operationalize our commitment to, and then take language right out of the charter, to achieve the vision of the inclusion charter, both within our organization and in our community. So it's that council directs staff to operationalize our commitment to taking action to achieve the vision of our inclusion charter, both within our organization and in the community. So it's lifting language out of here and just directing staff to operationalize that, to move that.
comments, questions on? Any comments, any questions? Councillor Morton.
Through you, Madam Mayor, does that take away what the actual charter means by changing what has been brought forward?
I'm not asking to change anything. I'm just asking that our resolution directs staff to operationalize the charter. The charter talks about taking action, and so I'm asking for us to direct staff to operationalize that and report back to us.
Okay.
So not changing the charter at all.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor Roy DiClemente.
I'm not sure if operationalize is the right word. I'd like to find a different word. I'm fine with the intent of the motion. I'm just not sure about operationalize. That we direct staff to bring the charter to life for our community, to put structures in place, but operationalize is it. It's a loaded word. I'm not sure it works for us. In truly bringing the intended or the spirit of this charter to life is really what we want to do. We want to direct staff to bring this charter to life in what we're, in our actions and in our business dealings with our residents.
It's so perhaps, yeah, what's the word? Initiate.
So it's around the town is committed to taking action. And to me, we have to operationalize that. And I'm fine with letting go of that word. Someone has a better word, but to me, that's the word, is what does that look like? We can commit to take action, but unless we actually have a plan to take action, it's only words on a page. So I'm looking for, how does our commitment to take action to achieve the vision, blah, 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 what does that look like to staff? I was trying to keep it vague so that staff we're not tying their hands, they can come back to us with, this is what that looks like. What does that action look like? And I'm fine with a different word. I just don't have one.
Can we see the resolution on the screen, please? I wonder if we simply say that council directs staff to take action to achieve the vision of the inclusion charter, both in the organization and within the community, and report back.
That works for me.
Okay. You have a thesaurus in your brain. Much better, yes. Too many twos in there.
It's not the thesaurus, it's the editor.
Yes. Is this moved, and is this moved by Councillor Carruthers? Question? All those in favor? That's carried. Okay. Now, Mr. Clerk.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I believe you're on to item M, Legal and Counsel Support Services.
With Councillor Foster in the chair.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Our first item on the agenda, I believe we have three, is Legal and Counsel Support Services 2019-4 regarding the Council Code of Conduct. Mr. Horner, any comments?
I'm happy to speak briefly to this and then take any questions that council might have. But recent amendments to the Municipal Act require every municipality to have a code of conduct in place for March 1. We've brought this to council in a couple of iterations. First in October, we received some comment, and we brought it back in January to incorporate changes that reflect the comments received. Today, frankly, we're actually recommending that you adopt the code and ratify it this evening so that council can be compliant with the March 1 deadline for compliance. But very happy to take any questions that council might have about the code.
Questions from members of council? Yes,
Mr. Webster?
Chair Foster, through the mayor. I was hopeful I could provide a little more context. We were required to select an integrity commissioner, which we did. And part of this report, if you look through it, is it would be really nice in York Region if we were all moving in the same direction. But unfortunately, it looks like 3 municipalities in the region have selected this firm or this individual, and others are moving in different directions. So what you're seeing is there's no consistency to a code of conduct at this point. Our particular integrity commissioner has met with us at the orientation, and if you recall, has asked for a 3 to 4 hour session. And that's been consistent with what he's asked from the region and other municipalities, and nobody's been able to give him that time, frankly. And checked with my colleagues in Aurora recently who just adopted a code and used a similar, and Aurora's given him a total of 2 hours. And that's somewhat similar to what we were prepared to offer the Integrity Commission. I think we had about an hour at the orientation, and at the workshop we just recently had, we were proposing another hour. One of the things that this simplified code, and I believe this simplified code, I'm going to call it simplified, because I have talked to other folks who said the 10 Commandments were actually written on a much smaller scale than the Council Code of Conducts. Our particular choice for Integrity Commissioner, and I don't know if we knew this with open eyes going in, is proposing his own version or his firm's version of a very robust code of conduct. And I believe, Mr. Horner, it's totals how many pages? 42 pages. It's quite a read. It's been distributed to members of regional council. And what we're finding is there may be some merits in moving there, but at this point, to have a code of conduct in place that's maybe a little simpler for initially, and I'm going to quote Councillor Crone there, who called the strategic plan hopefully a living document. I think we're hoping that the code of conduct will be a living document, and we'll be able to firstly utilize the service of the chosen integrity commissioner to assist the elected officials. I think that's very important in providing independent, solid advice. And I think what we'd like to do is continue to monitor what's happening at the regional level. I think they could be running out of time to hit the March 1st deadline, and see what the other municipalities do. I think we owe it to the integrity commissioner to have his 1-hour session still, and I think we're going to propose that be in April. So I guess what we're saying is that we have to endorse it, and I don't think we can use the word in principle, but I think it's really to endorse it, have it in place, and then to keep it under review as it may have to be adjusted or refined as we move forward. So I thought that might just be a little context to Mr. Horner, and feel free to add more, or Clerk Lamanna, on who are very much responsible for this report, and I appreciate that.
It's the Integrity Commissioner's job to provide you advice on the code. And he'll do that when he has the opportunity to do it. But he has assured us that this code is compliant with statute. We'll do the job, but frankly, he prefers his own model. One of the reasons why he prefers it, in terms of what he's indicated to us, is that it's a product of his own experience. But at the end of the day, council owns the code, and council decides what the code provides. So we're very happy to be able to provide you with a code that you can ratify for March 1.
Thank you, Mr. Horner. I think it's important, after the conversations that you and I had, again, we talk about a living document, but I think we decided that, kind of the two of us, it's pretty hard to tear something down before you get the opportunity to use it. So we've kind of sawed a little bit off here. It's not 42 pages, it's 11, but we think it's going to work. And hopefully we can make that happen. So can I have a mover? Persicini? Any other comments? Councillor Carruthers?
Thank you. As many of you know, school boards were mandated to have a code of conduct a number of years ago. Our overseeing body drafted up, with lots of legal help, a code of conduct that they felt was fair and effective. It wasn't until that started getting used that they realized the holes that were in it. So until you're absolutely right, Councillor Foster, until you get to use it, you don't see where the holes are. And one of the biggest holes is weaponizing it against each other. So when you see a larger code of conduct, it's often taking in those type of situations based on the Integrity Commissioner's experience. I can say, based on my own experience, where trustees went after each other with a code of conduct, you needed more pages to try and minimize the impact on the governing body. So more pages is actually often better, because it foresees things that until you actually use it, you don't foresee. So I don't want to hold this up, that if it's the Integrity Commissioner that has to enforce it, and if he is comfortable with this, then we should absolutely pass this. But I just want to say, based on experience, a simple code of conduct can be used against people, and you really want to have something robust. And we're very lucky that our Integrity Commissioner has so much experience, and we should rely on him, because, like anything, you don't know what you need until you need it. It's a little bit like your insurance agreement. If you had a one-page, one-paragraph insurance agreement, probably isn't a very good insurance agreement. You want something that's robust and looks at various situations. So I'm happy to approve this today. I do think an hour is not enough time for the Integrity Commissioner. I think 2 hours as a minimum, and that we should be looking at his code of conduct going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from committee? Councillor Roy DeClemente.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Perhaps, given that we recognize that this is a living document and possibly would be amended later, I wonder if I might suggest that we also direct staff to reschedule the postponed workshop and so that we can enshrine that into our resolution that says we still want another kick at this. It's just that we have a deadline that we need to address. I think it would be appropriate. I'd also like to see that 43-page document before that workshop, if it could be circulated ahead of time. I think that would, at least from my perspective, I would get more value from the Integrity Commissioner's time with us if I had had a chance to review that document ahead of time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any further? Councillor Crone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With respect to insurance documents, having spent a fair bit of time with them, I can assure you the longer they are, they sometimes contradict elements of themselves. So I think the key is to strike a balance, the right balance of content, and I guess we'll find that out once we start living it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further? So moved by Councillor Persicini, and he's coming. And we're going to try to reschedule the workshop and possibly have a look at that other document. Mr. Clerk.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So with regards to the workshop, there is an item on today's committee of the whole agenda that speaks to workshop topics, and I believe CEO Webster was thinking that this would be part of that discussion at that point.
Thank you. So again, moved by Councillor Persicini. Can we have a vote to ratify and adopt at this time? All those in favor? And that would be carried. Okay, where are we here? The next item on the agenda is a memo regarding the letter of no objection for the black powder firearms. That came before us, I think, at the last meeting. Mr. Horner, any comments?
I think Mr. Clerk did some research on this particular matter, so I'll ask the clerk to speak to it.
Mr. Clerk.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So following Council's additional questions that they had, I did follow up with Mr. Halink, and he did explain that his organization is very separate to Ram Rodeo. I think that's what I need to stress to you. And I initially, when we presented the resolution, was talking about a exemption to noise bylaw and the firearms bylaw, and it's not indeed an exemption to those bylaws. What Mr. Halink needs is just a no objection letter so that he can proceed to the Chief Firearms Office of Ontario to obtain a permit to shoot off those blank firearms. And he did confirm, as I indicated in the memo, that the show will be conducted totally within the arena, which will add some noise attenuation. So if there's any further questions, I can certainly try to answer those.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Carruthers.
I will be voting no to this because I do object to the firing of guns for entertainment.
Madam Mayor?
Thank you. Did he indicate how many people attend the Ram Rodeo? I'm just wondering, is it? I know that the arena will hold several hundred, maybe 700 or 800. I'm not really sure. Perhaps our chief might know the occupancy load there, but I'm not a big fan of it. But on the other hand, if it's going to be an event that they're hosting, and the Ram Rodeo has been around forever, I would not want to prohibit them from being able to hold an event at their facility.
Through you, Mr. Chair, certainly don't have numbers of attendees. I can follow up with that in terms of with the Ram Rodeo organizer. Mr. Halink, as I indicated, is totally separate to the Ram Rodeo, but just providing a show within it. Correct, Madam Mayor, Ram Rodeo has been around for a number of years, maybe not under the auspice of Ram Rodeo as it's sponsored by Dodge Ram Trucks, perhaps under another moniker. However, from my understanding in speaking to the organizers, this Ram Rodeos is a circuit, and it travels around Ontario, and it's ending up here in East Gwillimbury for the year-end championships. So I think there might be a higher number of attendees at this event, only because this is the championship event.
I'd like to know if in fact that, if they're looking at 1,000 people at this event, or 700 or 800 or 100. I know that they have horse shows there on a regular basis, but I'd like to know before I made a decision. And it's in the fall, so I know we've already asked them for one time, but I'd like to know if in fact this is a really big event in East Gwillimbury.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Can we defer the vote of the letter of no objection until we get that information?
Through you, Mr. Chair, so this memo is just providing you that additional information that Council requested. On the conclusion of the memo, I'm indicating that if there are no further questions from Council, I'll present Mr. Halink's original request at the March 5th Council meeting for that no objection. So perhaps what I'll suggest is that I'll just take Council's further questions back to the organizers, and I'll present the no objection request once I obtain that information.
Thank you. So I don't need a mover to go ahead? Excuse me, Councillor Morton?
Thank you. Through the chair. Madam Mayor, I do know that many years ago this was held in Newmarket on Yonge Street, and they transferred it out of there to East Gwillimbury because they outgrew the space, because there was so many people that got involved in it. And as the clerk says, it was run by Dodge Ram and things like that. So it's been going on for a long, long time, and I personally don't really, I think that it's not going to be a small attendance, it's going to be a fairly large one.
Thank you. So I'd like to suggest that we just move to receive the information, the memo, at this time. Can we have a vote for that? All in favor? And opposed? So that would be carried. So the last item we have is Legal and Counsel Support Services Memo regarding additional information with the Army cadets and their tagging. This too came before us, I believe, last meeting. Can I have a mover? Councillor Persicini. Mr. Horner, any comments?
I'll direct this to the Deputy Clerk, who did some research on the issue.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, this particular information memo is being presented to you as a direction that was provided by Council on February 5th. In terms of follow-ups, I did follow up with both the Queen's York Rangers and the 32 Military Police Army Cadet Corps. And some of the questions and inquiries from Council was with respect to coordinating the two tagging initiatives and the request for permission from Council to conduct tagging. So in terms of that, we've researched their policy. There is no requirement for Council to grant permission for tagging. So with that in mind, this was essentially like a courtesy notice for Council so that you would be aware that some initiative such as like this is happening in the town. With respect to the York Region Police Army cadets, I was advised that last year they ran into some issues regarding their coordination, but this year they will be conducting in April, and I believe it will be conducted at Vince's Market. So there's nothing preventing them from continuing their initiative in that sense. Other than that, I believe in terms of future advisements, what we can do is if we were to receive notices such as these, we can simply place it on Information Correspondence webpage and provide you with an email advisement so that you're aware of such initiatives. And that brings me to the end of this information correspondence.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? So we have a motion from Councillor Persicini to receive, and I'll ask for a vote. All those in favor? And that will be carried. I can pass it back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. We're under other business, and council workshop topics is listed. The Integrity Commissioner was one, and our precinct was another one that had some possibilities. I would think based on our Integrity Commissioner discussions that we've had so far that may be a priority over precinct. Go ahead, Mr. Webster.
I actually have 4 topics, Madam Mayor.
Oh, okay.
So I think that would give staff enough time to bring the strategic plan back for another discussion element. That would be 2 months from now, and I think it would give an opportunity for a little more thought and discussion into that document. There's a report that's been generated about advisory committees and groups, I believe, that was going to be brought forward in March. That was looking at a workshop. It could be a workshop or it could be discussed at committee, the mandates and whatnot. So I guess the real key is I could see the strategic plan probably needing an hour. If the Integrity Commissioner, if Council collectively wishes, normally we probably would book an hour, but I've had discussion here of 2 hours, so I don't know if that would be considered a full workshop or whether or not you'd want to have two sort of a morning and afternoon session that we sometimes do and have two-hour sessions. So we could have either civic precinct discussion and community elements of that for an hour, or the advisory committee groups, which I think is really focusing sort of on mandates and things like that, the clerk was hopeful of getting some discussion and direction from council.
I would think the advisory committees, we're hoping to get them up and going and have their marching orders, so to speak. Would you think an hour would be sufficient on that one?
I am advising as well. This is for the April workshop. We don't have one planned for March, right? So it's this is sort of 60 days hence, or
April 9th.
45 days hence, yes.
If we looked at the Integrity Commissioner for the morning and we had strategic plan and advisory committee discussion in the afternoon, it wouldn't make for a terribly long day unless we got carried away with one of the topics.
That sounds good to me.
And that'll put a check mark beside those as we move forward.
It's important too with the civic precinct because frankly, the last time it came to council, it had a whole bunch of amenities and it was sort of trying to position them or prioritize them all for this site. And I think Mr. Karmazin may be further along with some of the design discussions he's having with respect to the Healthy Active Living Plaza. We may have some further thoughts about other community areas that maybe some of those amenities could be located at as well. So I think that's part of the purpose of that. So maybe having a little more time for the community amenities and civic precinct discussion would be well advised, and we could do that at another workshop subsequent to April.
Okay. Very good. Is there anything else under other business? Councillor Roy DeClemente.
I'm thinking, so if we've got our April topics down, the civic precinct, and I had suggested earlier today that we have a little session on the water system as well. So maybe we could put those forward for May at another date. But I think the code of conduct, the strategic plan, and committee mandates is a job worth doing sooner rather than later. And I think it would be they dovetail well together. Thank you.
The date of the May workshop, do you have it, Mr. Clark?
Through you, Madam Mayor, that May workshop is scheduled for May 14th.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? Go ahead.
Can we wait until April for the advisory committees? To me, we want to get them up and running as soon as possible. And I would worry that April's a long time, especially if we would then after that have to endorse their terms of reference. Would be into May for sure before the committees even meet for the first time.
Mr. Clerk, we have a lot already operating, so this workshop would include the new ones that are proposed as opposed to those that are operating now, or is it a mix?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the report that CEO Webster is referring to encompasses all of the existing and new terms of references. So what I've done, I've spent a lot of time revising the existing terms of references. They're mainly focusing on their objectives. I think that's what I would like to receive from council as input, is clearly what is it that you want your committees to work on. And certainly the new committees, being new to East Gwillimbury, I've taken some best practices from other municipalities, but certainly still need that input from EG Council. So I'm going to come forth on March 5th with a list of the applicants that we've had to date. Certainly we can run the recruitment of your committee members and the terms of references concurrently. I don't think you need to really rush getting the terms of references up and running. There's lots of time. I mean, keep in mind they are appointed for the term of council, much like yourselves, and not any different than the strategic plan. Let's get it right from the beginning and get the members working on it once council has taken a look at it and adopted it.
It may mean that if they are up and running as we're doing this, we have more input from them as well. Then it's driven solely by council, but I'm not sure. I would think that might be helpful.
Certainly, absolutely correct, Madam Mayor. The input that I'm seeking in terms of establishing the terms of references is what council would like to see your committees do and what work they want accomplished. But after that, once your members are appointed, there's certainly value in seeking their input because they have a direct interest in that particular committee. And certainly, they can take the terms of reference and make recommendations back to council on some changes or other objectives to add.
Go ahead.
So the committees can be duly constituted, have a meeting to review the terms of reference before. Okay, thank you. That's all I needed.
That is correct,
Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Okay. So we've covered that. Is there anything else under other business? Last call. Okay. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Carruthers, all those in favor? And that's carried, and that is at 4:26. We have private